We're going to call this meeting of the Greenwich Board of Education to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Just before we move on to approve the meeting agenda, I just want to say our hearts go out to the families of the Stoneham Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Yet another senseless tragedy in schools. School safety is certainly on our minds now, something we've been talking about, something we've been watching. Obviously, Connecticut is closer to it than most places with Sandy Hook, so just wanted to just take that moment to say we're thinking about them. With that, can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Is there a second? Ms. Dayton, Ms. Stowe? Any discussion of anything on the meeting agenda? All right, with that, all those in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Megan Olson is on the phone tonight, folks, just to let you know. And that's an aye from you, Megan?
No.
Yes, so it's 8-0. Thank you. Yes, a little challenge, but we're gonna overcome technology tonight. All right, with that, can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Dr. Francis, is there a second? Ms. Stowe? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda? Megan?
Aye.
Aye. It passes 8-0. Thank you. All right. Now we're going to go to our school welcome. Ms. Granville. You have a presentation?
Yeah, we're going to talk and then we'll present.
All right. Let us know so we can move.
Good evening, Dr. Gilday, Board of Education members, cabinet members, and distinguished guests. My name is Mary Granville, and as the principal of Parkway School, it is my honor and privilege to warmly welcome you here tonight. You might be surprised to hear that I am sometimes asked the question, even by Greenwich locals, where exactly is Parkway? And in speaking with some of you tonight, I think some of you were a little surprised how far we are, and I wish it was lighter out so you could have enjoyed a more beautiful drive, because it really is stunningly beautiful here. But rest assured, though we do not get the amount of traffic as some of the other schools, which is fine, our location here in Backcountry serves as a picturesque backdrop to a school that is vibrant, innovative, and on the move. For those of you who are still not sure where we are or who we are, don't worry, you will. Allow me to introduce you, or reintroduce you as the case may be, to Parkway School. We are a small, close-knit community of approximately 250 students with 2 sections of each grade, kindergarten through 5, as well as home to 3 preschool classes. I am told our catchment area represents nearly 60% of the geography of Greenwich. We are located on 17 acres, and we were designated a Green Ribbon School in 2015 by the U.S. Department of Education. Parkway School has a long tradition of academic excellence. In fact, we were very proud to hear the news last week from the Connecticut State Department of Education informing us that Parkway School was among the top 10% of all Connecticut schools. We are a school that tries to live our district norms each day. We recognize and celebrate our students for being here, being safe, being honest, caring for self and others, and letting go and moving on. We support our students in learning how to initiate and sustain friendships and peacefully resolve conflicts. We are a community that knows all of our students by name and where students feel loved, safe, and successful. At Parkway, we are an experienced team of administrators, teachers, specialists, and support staff whose sole focus is to know our students well and take them from where they are to where they need to be and beyond. We critically analyze student data to personalize our instruction and create challenging learning pathways for each of our students. We utilize technology to inform, to communicate, and share feedback. Parkway has joined other schools across the nation in offering our students STEAM time. This approach to learning utilizes the skills of science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics as access points to guide and support student inquiry, dialogue, and critical thinking. In fact, our school was recently visited by a team of administrators and teachers from Scarsdale who were interested in learning more about what we were doing here at Parkway. As you may know, today we held an orientation for the parents of incoming kindergarten students. Do you remember that, parents, going to the first meeting about for your 5-year-old joining kindergarten? During our orientation, our kindergarten team shared a video presentation describing a day in the life of kindergarten. During what has been a week filled with questions about how we take care of our students at school, I decided I would share this with you, not only because it's a wonderful window into our worlds that Mr. Sweeney and Mr. Catalano create in their classrooms each day, but because there's nothing that will leave you feeling more hopeful and more optimistic about our future than the smiles, laughter, and wonder of our kindergarten students. Welcome to Kindergarten at Parkway School.
What are the ingredients to a successful kindergarten day?
So, first you add flour, then you put pancake mix in it, a lot of pancake mix, and then you add hot boiled water, then you roll it out. You add eggs, and the ones in tail, and you put a little more hot water, and then you roll, and then you blend it. February 1st, 2018. Yesterday was Wednesday. Today is Thursday. Tomorrow will be Friday. Today is Sunday. Morning work, readers workshop, snack, writers workshop, art, math, science, lunch, read-aloud, recess, word sort, poetry binder, Saturday's Christmas song. It was the grasshopper. Today I was at my house. I just heard stuff and I was sleeping. And I woke up. I was sleeping on the couch.
Here the students are practicing math skills and deepening foundational math concepts in the section of the day we call Math Workstations. While some skills lend themselves nicely to partner work, other skills are more appropriately practiced in small groups or individually. These flexible groupings vary based on the needs of the learner and the task at hand. Using the correct math language will help them understand the math concepts.
I have a 9. Mine is less than yours. I have 8. So we're doing math ways to make 8. And one way that I tried was 10 minus 4 plus 2. 10 plus 10 equals 20.
Pick a hat, a kind of hat.
Yeah.
Chef's hat. Go for it.
In the kitchen, a chef wears a chef hat. You read through the words because that's one that we don't know. And what makes sense, point to the word, and pictures and words match for what we today is Wednesday. We have PE and music. How did you get that?
Blue Jay was cold too. He got into the mid after rally.
Sometimes the book can be easy in one book, and sometimes another book can have hard words.
So what do you do with those hard words?
Read them. Today is the last day of kindergarten. I wish it were the first. Today I will flag. Today I will flag. The ladder began to shake. 3 monsters more, now 4 monsters more. All dogs can run. All dogs are amazing.
And this is called the function line. This gives Cubeto special jobs to do.
How does the block report to the...
It's the computer. There's a computer in here and a computer in here.
Oh, and
They talk to each other.
So when that wiggles, it's going to make...
You'll see how it works in just a minute.
Then when I'm going to... If you put the bleed down here, he's going to start following there. After you. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm trying to build a monkey playground. That's what they need.
Isla, was today your first time buying lunch?
Yes,
How did it go?
it was good.
What did you order?
It's yogurt, Cheerios, and raisins, and the water bottle.
Was it hard for you to go buy the lunch for your first time?
Now,
It was easy.
yes.
Are you going to buy lunch again, do you think?
I think so.
So that's a quick look at Parkway, and we're glad you're here. Say goodbye to the camera.
Thank you again for being here this evening.
All right, I know some of the football guys up here were smiling watching those kids because they remember, right? You guys remember that? All right. So next up on our agenda is actually recognizing some of our all-state football athletes. So Coach Marino, if you want to come on up.
Sure. If you want. Thank you for the Board of Education and cabinet members. I appreciate you guys having us out here. These kids have worked so hard, not only on the athletic fields, but also in the classroom and in the community. They deserve the honor. And one couldn't be here. We have 5 out of 6, which just so happens to be the biggest class to make all-state Greenwich football history, and I think that says a lot given the tradition of the program. I'll call you up individually. Come on up, and Gavin Muir, quarterback, junior quarterback. Captain Kyle Woodring, senior offensive lineman. Senior place kicker, and will go in the history books for the state of Connecticut as the all-time most field goals in a season, Zach Moore. Junior defensive end, Mosey Beasy. Junior running back, Tyson Camizio. Last but not certainly least, but not present, senior defensive back, Jeremiah Harris.
Ready?
We have actually a couple more teams to honor this year. Indoor track, and what was the other one that we just recently won? The FCAC got? I think gymnastics. So watch for us in April. All right, with that, we're going to move into our public hearing. So first up would be the GHS student government.
Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Gilday, members of the board. I hope everyone had a nice break. It's certainly nice to get a rapid swing of things immediately. Last Wednesday, Valentine's Day, a day celebrated by love and care, turned into a day tormented by confusion and a loss of words. Personally, I had received a news alert on my phone that there was an active shooter at Stoneman Douglas High School. Immediately, my heart dropped, as it has so many other times, as Newtown, Las Vegas, and Aurora. But this time it dropped especially low. My cousin attends that school. My cousin was in the freshman building just 2 doors down, where 17 innocent kids and faculty had lost their life. As I was in awe, confusion, and shock, I couldn't think of how this could happen as a regular event in our society. As a cousin, a citizen, a student, and a student body president, I have found it my duty to speak up and speak out. Students in Greenwich are done. Every student in our nation is done. If our government doesn't hear our voices already, we're going to make them heard. Today I had met with a group of students who are in the forefront of this movement and are planning to launch a full force of students from the Greenwich community and whoever else would like to be involved to lobby everyone we can, from the Board of Ed to local government to Congress. Something must be done. Gandhi said it best: be the change that you wish to see in this world. I can tell you, after speaking with hundreds of Greenwich students, they want to be that change. This will include Greenwich students participating in the March 14th walkout protest. Student government has reached out and spoke with activist groups such as March On and our local representative Fred Camillo. This is just one small step in a marathon that we will complete. A student must be able to sit in the classroom and indulge in amazing topics without fearing for their life. If our government is going to sit back and let this happen, students from Greenwich and nationwide know that we must stand up and stop this. On a completely unrelated topic, I must say a few words regarding the parking situation on Hillside Road. This morning, I got the opportunity to listen to the Board of Selectmen discuss street parking on Hillside. While one selectman was supportive of student parking, two appeared to be ready to eliminate it. I appreciate that they gave us some time to speak and voice the students' perspective. We must realize that the 72 on-street parking spaces are not the cause of the mass congestion that is the neighbors' main worry. They are offering what they believe is a solution to the problem that is clearly not the solution. Thankfully, Greenwich High School is a school where there is always an activity going on during school hours or after. Naturally, by having a high-performing, high-schedule school, there will be traffic. Getting rid of the parking along Hillside Road will not improve traffic problems or change the fact that GHS property is used 7 days a week. But what it will do is affect our town, families, and students. In Greenwich, it costs roughly $80,000 to add another bus to the system. This year, due to start and end time circumstances, the town has already taken a significant monetary hit. Our buses are at capacity. With less kids driving, that means more money spent by the town to accommodate transportation. It affects families, as many students must drive home directly after school to take care of their siblings. If students cannot get home fast enough, that means the family must have whoever is watching the kids stay longer. But most importantly, it affects our students. Students in Greenwich do things after school that are eye-opening. Some run companies, others rush to Bridgeport to volunteer. It's truly amazing. By limiting their ability to park, it delays their work or volunteer hours. The bottom line is that you cannot move 3,000 people in and out of a high school without an extreme amount of traffic. I have spoke with Dr. Winters. If the neighbors would like to have a luncheon or any other function during the day, then the high school would be completely open to reserving spots along the road or in one of our lots. However, is giving up 72 spots all of the time really worth it? There's a legal background to this matter too. The town had signed the municipal improvement application in 1991, which affirmed parking along Hillside Road, and then affirmed it again in 2010 with MISA. Students are taking action themselves. Student government has released an op-ed that gives a more detailed approach to the points I just made. In addition, on a petition created yesterday, there's already over 1,100 signatures supporting student parking. With all of our own efforts, students are also relying and calling upon the Board of Ed to help their voices heard with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning and Zoning Commission to make sure they do not go through with this. Parking is not just a privilege enjoyed by GHS seniors, yet an outlet and a resource that helps us to excel in all the amazing things we do in and outside of the classroom. Thank you.
Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Gilday, and members of the board. I'll keep this short and sweet. Greg went on the record. As always, I will start with a few monthly updates. Tomorrow we'll be holding our February blood drive, and we currently have 77 out of 89 available slots filled, and we are looking forward to saving as many lives as we can. We are continuing our plans for the food truck fair in May with new food trucks and activities. SRO is in 2 short weeks, and I'm very excited to see how the show comes together. As Greg mentioned before, GHS students are actively encouraging the idea of youth advocacy. Greg and I, among with other GHS students, want to encourage students to be active members of our community and our government. We are demanding a change and hoping to plan an all-student driven force. On March 14th, GHS will take part in the National Walkout. While many are taking this as a political approach, we are emphasizing that this is not about politics, yet coming together as a community and making our voices heard. We plan to have GHS get involved encouraging students, teachers, and administrators to walk out for 17 minutes, a minute for every victim killed at Stoneman Douglas High School. We will take this time to organize speeches, lead a moment of silence, and call for action. We want to take matters into our own hands and keep the sentiment alive. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Carol Sutton on behalf of the GEA.
Good evening, Ms. Granville, Chairman Bernstein, board members, Dr. Gilday, members of the cabinet, and members of the community. My name is Carol Sutton, and I'm honored to represent over 900 members of the Greenwich Education Association. So I'm looking out today, and the athletes are gone, but it makes me especially proud that our football team and our girls indoor track team, for the first time ever, were able to achieve what they did, in some cases under not exactly the optimum conditions. So it's quite amazing. And I see a lot of faces out there, and it's a great crowd. And I'm hoping not everyone's here to talk about fields and parking, even though those are extremely important. So we are eagerly awaiting the results of the 3 school start time surveys. We hope there was a really good response rate from everyone in the Greenwich Public School family. We're looking forward to hearing that next time. I just want to talk about one topic tonight. It was a rough vacation for many teachers, pretty rough. As we absorbed the news of Parkland, seeing ourselves and our children in the victims and survivors, and wondering what made the perpetrators snap, questions swirled. What if? How far would I go to protect my students? Are my students and I safe in our place of work? Because that's what kids are doing there, they're working. Do I really know my students? Am I missing anything? Is there anything we can do to make a measurable difference in terms of safety? Why does it take a tragedy to bring this issue into focus? Like I said, it was a rough vacation for many, and I'm sure for many of you. But GAA got to work. We know that data talks, so we created a survey in which we are asking the teachers 2 questions. One is, how confident are you in the lockdown procedures at your school? Rating from extremely to not at all. Second question is, how confident are you in the safety and security of your building? And again, it's a rating. And we plan to sort the results by school and share it with the district leadership and also with building leadership by the end of the week. And we're at about 60% response rate in only 2 days, so we're doing pretty well. So in addition to asking the teachers those 2 questions and allowing them to add comments, we also asked the teachers if there was anything they would like their president to share with you this evening. And so as you can imagine, there were many contributions. So I'm just going to share a few and give you some general trends. One I thought had to be quoted verbatim. Quote, "The diligence of the administration and Greenwich Police Department when it comes to our safety is comforting. I am thankful that the district continues to reevaluate and examine our procedures to make any adjustments as needed." And we are truly grateful for the relationship we have with the police department and the conscientiousness of the administration, especially of Officer Carlos and the other SROs. That means school resource officer, not the show that's coming up. And we appreciate them for the work they do every day and the preparation they do for the day that we hope never ever comes. We know that the administration and the police department work closely together to get it right, and we've seen it happen. On another, not surprisingly though, the teachers, they want more. One said, quote, "We are professional teachers. We are woefully underprepared for a situation like Parkland. We need more information, more training, and more tools to protect ourselves and our students," end quote. Many teachers told me to tell you that they know that safety and security are expensive. And they actually aren't they're pretty pessimistic that the district is going to pay for upgrades. Several mentioned the $52 million for NISA, or the millions being proposed for fields and lights. Remember, we're very raw. How much security would that buy? And beyond the security of our buildings and grounds, which is one type of prevention, and of course necessary, Teachers want you to hear once again that we need to do more to address the needs of all of our students, especially those of our at-risk students and their families, and to address them as early as possible and from multiple vantage points. You know, everyone always goes back to, who is this person? And what did we miss? And where could we have done something? We appreciate greatly the district's focus on social and emotional learning. As you know, or as you'll see in the report tonight, there are great things going on in our schools. Great things. And the report clearly spells that out. The results, as measured by infractions, suspensions, and expulsions, these are all very encouraging, and we want to keep that up. Yet, some of our youngest learners are coming to us exhibiting more extreme behaviors than ever before, often the result of poverty and or family dysfunction, which we know knows no socioeconomic boundaries. Head count be damned. We need more professionals to pursue solutions with these students and their families. I've had it with head count. We need this as soon as the warning signs appear. The math is telling, everyone. If we include the assistant deans, which were not funded in the budget, but if we include them, and the guidance counselors, the ratio of GHS students to certified staff with mental health training is about 80-1. That's amazing. You know, that's amazing. If I said that to my colleagues in Bridgeport or Stanford or even Darien, they would like fall over. That's amazing. In the middle schools, it's about 135-1. It's pretty good. At the elementary level, however, there's one psychologist per building and one social worker for 11 schools. And there's another social worker that's paid for with a grant. Grants can go away. Anyway, so that's roughly 325 students to 1. And their families, which are much more involved at that level. So the teachers thought it was important for the board to see how this just doesn't add up. Not in any way. And believe me, they are not advocating for their buildings to evolve. Okay, to give up paraprofessionals for certified staff. That's not what they're advocating either. So to conclude, we need to work together. You, us, and especially the parents, using all available means to create a safe workplace for our students and teachers. We've had a lot of wake-up calls. The kids have had it. They're going to do their thing. Let's not leave this wake-up call unheeded. And finally, let's support our students who are having their Vietnam, their 9/11, whatever you want to call it. You know, we had our wake-up. Some of us woke up more than others. That's cool. But it is their time for action. And we need to be supportive of our children. Thank you.
Next speaker is Karen Hirsch on behalf of the PTA Council.
Good evening, Dr. Gilday, Chairman Bernstein, members of the board, Principal Glanville, the cabinet, and the community. I am Karen Hirsch, President of Greenwich PTA Council. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence to honor the students and staff who needlessly lost their lives in Parkland, as well as for the families who lost loved ones and the survivors who are taking a stand for themselves and all students and educators nationwide. Thank you. I know it's hard to go from a moment of reflection like that to share comments. However, nothing celebrates life more than honoring the achievements of our students. And with that, Council would like to congratulate our All-State footballers who probably went home to do their homework on their well-deserved award this evening. It's a fitting entry into tonight's big topics. Fields. It's clear that the parents of the more than 9,000 public school students are going to have a diversity of opinion on any individual question. and the needs of their students, including one major need, fields. Even with such a wide breadth of opinions, council can agree on a number of guiding principles. Every student at each of our 15 schools must have access to safe playing fields. Safe being defined by a number of measures, addressing any concerns over contamination and toxicity, adequate lighting, properly maintained and engineered fields, appropriate parking, traffic, and pedestrian ways which are safe and accessible, and appropriate supervision so different groups use the fields at the same times. It would be helpful to develop a master plan specifically for fields, which would facilitate public engagement and allow us to best understand the current and goal inventory of the number and types of fields included, intended uses, and impact on public access within Greenwich. While the town has suffered from a lack of adequate indoor and outdoor rec space for many years, the change in school start and end time has highlighted this matter and created a more timely need to immediately address this issue. And while there is no clear answer on the best way to remediate the situation, it is clear from discussions with council that no one single issue should drive a decision for all fields. Remember, this is not simply about middle school fields or high school athletics, but serving the needs of our more than 9,000 students and the thousands of residents who use our fields daily. Parents do not want to see a reduction in any athletic programs simply due to a lack of indoor or outdoor space or availability. Parents want a clear definition of grass, turf, and engineered fields, and a defined plan for immediate relief, as well as a long-range plan to alleviate the fields problems. Any improvements in our school facilities and fields will only serve to benefit all residents, as it increases both property values and improves the overall lure of Greenwich, and shows that we are investing in our future. Council is advocating for the town, the Board of Education, Parks and Rec, and more, to coordinate their efforts to create real solutions, not more questions. The town needs to widen their views and not just look at our schools to find solutions, but to look towards other areas of town to find or develop fields and indoor and outdoor rec space which could be available to our students now or while their fields are being upgraded. With athletics being a graduation requirement, it is imperative that we provide our students at all schools with proper fields. Team sports teach children a lot more than how to throw a ball. There are many valuable life lessons learned on those fields. The bottom line, playing sports prepares them for the next phases of their lives and are a key point in our students' social and emotional growth. And while there are positive life lessons we hope they all learn on our fields, there are other life lessons we prefer they all need not learn. It was not too long ago that the nation's focus was on Connecticut, more specifically Sandy Hook. We as a community, state, and nation learned quite a bit from that horrific experience, and less than a week ago, the staff and students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School had to take those same lessons and put them into practice. Once again, parents across the nation and within our community have been responding to their students' concerns and questions. Most notably, could something like this happen at my school? While we can only hope that the answer to that question is no, we want to be certain that the safety of our staff and our students is our top priority. While Connecticut and our neighboring state of New York have enacted tougher gun laws, we must look at recent incidences, including last year's lockdown at the high school, as they prompt us to pause and reflect on the safety measures we currently have in place, including secure entryways and our standard response protocols. They remind us that we must learn from these incidents and continually revise those plans or make changes to structures if needed. We must remain vigilant, and we have to do more to protect the lives of our staff and our children and support the social, emotional, and mental health of our students. While parents want to be informed and make sure that their students are safe within the schools, we also want to make sure that no sensitive or specific details of plans or procedures or weaknesses in our system are ever shared in public forums. Parents want open communication and to be able to provide feedback if and when necessary, and council wants to commend the district and the schools on their recent messages to parents. They certainly helped us feel that our students are truly safe within the walls of Greenwich schools. And while the topics of fields and student safety are seemingly different, they both require similar solutions. Timely and effective communication, pre-planning, and built-in contingencies should things go awry. And they require a whole picture approach, addressing immediate needs but not at the expense of a long-term view. Finally, they both require teamwork and collaboration. Members of council want to remind you that we are always available to help to support our schools in addressing the safety, health, and well-being of our students. In closing, while the most recent shooting occurred on Valentine's Day, we hope that the enduring message from that horrible day is not one of hatred, but a legacy of love for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we have our community comments. Speakers each have 3 minutes. We'll call you in order. Looks like we've got over a dozen speakers already signed up, and then we'll see if anybody else wants to speak. I recognize a lot of the names. I know some of you have spoken before, so we would ask you to keep your comments brief as we do have a lot of work before us tonight. So with that, the first speaker is Susan Kalla with Christine Kranger next. So just to remind you, it's 3 minutes and we'll give you 30 seconds notice to wrap up.
Hi, I'm here to speak about Eastern Middle School and the planned development there. My name is Susan Kalla, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity to speak to you. And I've been in Greenwich for 30 years. So the reason why I picked Greenwich was because it's a safe community, it's a beautiful place, and that's the reason why I've stayed. So one of the reasons why it's safe is because it's a very tightly knit community where all the parents and the neighbors look after each other. And everybody has a vested interest in everyone else being safe, and they do a very good job of keeping people safe. It's also a very insular community. It's designed so it's really for the use of just the Greenwich residents, just the Riverside residents. And so that way it just keeps it safe. So the kids that are in this environment that is focused on safety, and it's focused on people looking out for each other, and it's focused on people knowing each other and caring about each other, the kids do very well. They all flourish in this environment. My son just finished the University of Chicago, and he's in graduate school there. And he had many opportunities, and most of the kids that go through the schools end up with very, very good opportunities to develop beyond Greenwich. So we'd like to keep it that way. It's, this is part of the fabric of the community, and I think there's 3 elements that keep it very safe. Number one is you have the people looking after each other. So they form a very strong ring of defense. And second, you have teachers that look after the kids, and they form a secondary line of defense. And then you have the police. You have an enormous police department here. And so they also look after them, and anybody can call them and get any problem taken care of. It makes the community extraordinarily safe. So I think if you change any of that, if you decide you want to invite in people to a world-class athletic facility at Eastern Middle School, you blow holes in all of the lines of defense. The parents, how can the parents know that a stranger has good intentions or bad? You would ruin that line of defense. How can a teacher know if a stranger at Eastern Middle School has good intentions or bad? In any of these cases, you no longer have this tight community that everyone has
30 seconds.
The same way, and you lose a lot of what you had. So and that brings us to another point. You invite people into Riverside or to Eastern School, which is Riverside's version of Binney Park. You also invite a lot of traffic into the community. And you have people that with out-of-state plates that zoom through Lockwood Road and don't stop at the crosswalks, and it takes one child to get run down in the crosswalk till everybody realizes that it was a really bad idea to invite people.
Time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so the next speaker is Christine Kraninger, followed by Erica Smith.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you again. The last time I stood in front of you, my name is Christine Kraninger, by the way. I'm mother to Joe Kraninger, who's a junior there, and I have a son, Ben, who graduated, and Natalie, who is in private school, but she just decided she's going to also attend Greenwich High. So I have another one coming in who is a 7th grader. The last time I stood in front of you, I all but begged for lights. I was trying to protect my son, his safety, his hard work, his high school experience. But since then, I've attended meetings and I've listened and I've tried to learn. And let's see, lights, fields, temporary lights, the middle school fields. I'm here to tell you that I don't think any of that is going to work. Our athletes need to practice at their high school, and we need to do everything we can to make that work. Spending money to transport our kids to practice across town or to other towns in traffic, wasting time that we just don't have, it just creates a whole slew of other problems. The loss of sunlight that we can't waste unless we plan on lighting all these other fields around town, fighting traffic, again, wasting precious time that we don't have. These kids are already losing free time, family time, sleep, study time. They're already tired. We know they're tired. We've talked about it. And isn't this the whole point of this? You know, more sleep. Wasn't that the beginning of all this? You know, human nature. These are kids that we're talking about. Missing the bus, they forget their equipment. You know, these are kids. We have an adequate high school. We have adequate fields. We have an adequate, you know, situation there at the high school. I think we need to try and make that work. I think we need to work towards a compromise and possibly a 245 dismissal. I'm actually going to say that out loud. I hope nobody stones me while I'm standing here. But lights, fields, Cardinal Stadium, everybody in town knows that that is a goal we need to work towards. I mean, you can go anywhere in town. Ever since I've been started, you know, we've been trying to talk to work about this. Everywhere I go, people are like, what's going on with that? What's going on? I can't get a tank of gas without somebody asking me what's happening with the fields and Cardinal Stadium. It's an important topic that people want to know what's happening. Not
30
just Cardinal
seconds.
Stadium, but this fall is important to people, to the kids. We need to find a dismissal time, and I just don't see any other way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so next up is Erica Smith, followed by Rosemary Anon.
Hi, my name is Erica Smith. I'm a resident of Coach Lamp Lane, which is across the street from Central Middle School. For months, my neighbors and I have come respectfully and attended meetings with you, with the town. We've petitioned and pleaded to the board, to town officials for honest and upfront information about the plans to transform the grass fields in our bucolic middle school neighborhood into a sports field for high school football players, and also for sale or rent to the highest bidder for use for myriad camps, sporting events, team practices, and rental patrons. Despite our polite discussions about the impact of this ambiguous plan, we've been met with platitudes, incomplete information, and loose assurances that sort of poo-poo our concerns. Originally, the board proposed $5 million for capital improvements to the field without consult to the neighborhood, the Conservation Commission, or even without the proper due diligence in the form of soil testing or a feasibility study. Thanks to the steadfast encouragement from our neighbors and supporters, you all have now agreed to do what should have been done from the onset: complete the feasibility and safety studies. However, we still have concerns and questions which deserve specific answers. We will pose them this evening and follow up with necessary town officials and voting bodies to ensure that those on the board and town officials continue to be encouraged to hear the strong objections and concerns from the citizens that these decisions affect. Number one, will you study the impact of traffic and safety, keeping in mind that there have already been multiple car-to-student accidents at this exact location already? A rudimentary search of the Yukon data crash statistics showed that there have been 10 reported accidents on Indian Rock Lane in the recent past. In comparison, neighboring neighborhoods have had 0 to 1 accident in the same time. So that lane is already 10 times more dangerous, as is. That's before we start busing football players and such in. The school also requires that neighborhood children walk to and from the school. I'm currently working with the police officers who is compiling a more in-depth search of the accidents. But we're asking you, have you guys researched this in your proposal? If your children lived in this neighborhood, would your recommendations be the same? It also seems that via board meeting transcripts and reporting in the local newspapers that the decision has already been made that Central Middle School is the selected location for this project.
30 seconds.
How was that decision made? Have you looked at other schools? Have you looked at other places? What specifically is the plan? We've heard of turf, we've heard of a bubble, we've heard of parking, we've heard of lights, but everything is so secretive, ambiguous, amorphous. I think we deserve a specific plan with specific details. We live in the neighborhood. Are you going to test noise consideration, lights, the impact of quality of life?
Time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rosemary is next, followed by Susan Rudolph.
Good evening. My name is Rosemary Anner. I've been a resident on Coachland Lane, which is just opposite the field of Central Middle School, for 38 years. I want to compliment this young mother who came and spoke because we support her. Our neighborhood supports her 100% on what you presented. A woman who spoke earlier said that the house values would go up. That's strange. I called 3 important realtors in town, and they told me that the value of our homes would go down if Central Middlefield was converted into a high school field and a town-wide sports field. If you drew a circle around Central, this is what you would find. Make that circle a circumference of 2 miles. You would find the expanded campus and parking lot of Greenwich Country Day School on Fairfield Road. Up here, here's Central. Next, you would find Greenwich High School on Hillside Drive. You would find GCD's Lois School Sports Field and the Skating Club on Cardinal Road. Then you come to Central, and you have the Baptist Church in Central. Go behind Central, you have the Greenwich Country Club on Dublin Road, which permits nerve-wracking skeet shooting 6 hours every Saturday and Sunday from November 1st to April 1st. Then you go up on Stanwich Road. You have St. Agnes Church and Stanwich School, which will become the high school for Greenwich Country Day. Come down Orchard Street from St. Agnes, and you're on Orchard Street at that junction. You have Pomerantz Park attracting outsiders outside the community to come to our park because it's an open parking there. You have the synagogue, which is now planning a nursery school right next to its property. And you have the very popular Rinaldi's Deli. This is not a question of not in my backyard. This is a question is we already have had enough in our backyards.
30 seconds.
Okay. Second reason that you should be dissuaded from adopting this. With the exception of possibly 2 members on your board members seem to be for high school sports on Central's field. Where is Parks and Recreation in this? Why have they not stepped up to the plate and spoken publicly about their plans? And why is your focus always on Central?
Time.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can't finish my sentence.
You can email to us if you'd like.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so next up is Susan Rudolph, followed by Arthur Yee.
So good evening. I'm Susan Rudolph. I'm president of the Ponderosa Drive Homeowners Association. Our homes are directly across from Central Middle School and on the opposite side of Indian Rock. I invite you, seriously, I invite you to stand at the entrance of the street, our street Ponderosa, and watch the bumper-to-bumper traffic, including, to my amazement, those cars making U-turns in the middle of Indian Rock. And you'll also see those who drive up and sit in idling vehicles at the entrance to Ponderosa as the children run across Indian Rock to the cars. Safety of children, we all agree, should be paramount in making any decision. It's not an accident waiting to happen because, as we just heard, there already have been accidents. And by the way, you should know that as concerned citizens who live near the Central Middle School, our homeowners association allows children from bordering streets to use our private street as a safe shortcut to Central Middle School. And now there's this possibility of turning a sports field, and I presume the lockers and the restrooms, over to the high school students. Let's not be naive. Teenagers will want to drive their cars or be picked up for a practice. They'll resist using school buses. And as for the thought that they'll walk from the high school to Central Middle School, think about the route that they'll be using. That truly is an accident waiting to happen. Second, the plan overview clearly states that the field would be used for more than team practices. Once an astronomical amount of money is spent on creating this one field, our neighborhood will soon be overcome with more noise, more traffic, and the loss of even tranquil weekends as Parks and Recreation rents the field to various leagues and programs and camps. Third, having a full-size football field with all its additional features will have a negative impact on our homes. We have asked a lot of realtors. That's not why we taxpayers bought our homes in this area. So I'd like to know
30 seconds.
How you arrived at the recommendation as the first priority, the fields at Central Middle. It appears the decision was made and now you're looking for a study to confirm this proposition. Why haven't other schools and other locations been included in the study? And by the way, the statement that the Central Middle School was the first choice because the site has adequate parking is questionable, if not specious. And secondly, how are we conducting the traffic study? I request that we be kept advised. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
So the next speaker is Arthur Yee, followed by Leanne Tell.
Good evening. My name is Arthur Yee, and I've lived on Coachland Lane for the past 20 years. My parents moved to Greenwich from New York City when I was 13 years old. We moved here to this lovely neighborhood community to skip the traffic congestion associated with the big city. I attended Central Junior High School in the late 1960s when traffic congestion around the school already existed. But back then, with 1 to 2 cars per household and no essential surrounding development, traffic congestion during peak school hours was manageable. Now, almost 50 years later, with the overdevelopment of this area surrounding Central Middle School, as outlined by my neighbors before me, and with a typical family now owning 3 to 4 cars per household, traffic congestion is less manageable. However, if you bring hundreds of high school student athletes to play in middle school fields after hours, then this traffic congestion problem will be totally unmanageable. As I previously asked the Board of Education members during previous meetings, please come by the Central Middle School to see how bad the traffic congestion is during peak hours. Student pickup times, town meetings, sporting events. Associated with this traffic congestion is a parking problem. I am very puzzled as to why quote-unquote parking availability was listed on the middle school fields project overview sheet as being one of the attributes for choosing Central Middle School as the first priority. Anyone who comes to Central Middle School when there are concerts, parents' nights, town meetings, or at school dismissal times will easily see that there is no parking availability, where instead cars are parked along Orchard Street where there are no shoulders or sidewalks, and where as it curves towards Central Middle School, it narrows the street with further, causing blind spots for both drivers and pedestrians, making it dangerous to drive in this area and to avoid pedestrian traffic. The lack of parking also leads to cars being parked on Coachland Lane, which is a private street. As a matter of fact, which I pointed out during my previous meetings here, during one of the recent P&Z meetings, a P&Z committee member with the initials MA acknowledged that she had to park in Coachland Lane when she was unable to find a parking spot elsewhere to attend a P&Z committee meeting at Central Middle School. I know that the Board of Education feels that the high school student athletes can be bused to and from Central Middle School to minimize the traffic congestion problem. But as a former Greenwich High School varsity student athlete myself, the reality is that this is not going to happen. As soon as I got my driver's license permit and license as a Greenwich High School junior, I wanted to drive anywhere and everywhere. Now with today's much more complex and busy world, leading to tighter schedules, expecting hundreds of high school students with 3 to 4 cars per household to follow a bus schedule to and from Central Middle School is unrealistic. I know that money's been requested for a feasibility study, Questions, who will be doing the study? Will be done by a local firm who knows the impact on local quality of life, and will be done during peak hours when all the schools are in session. As it is now, my wife and I were not allowed to endorse the walk to and from Central Middle School, even though we only live 1 block away.
Time.
Thank you. So the next speaker is Leanne Tell, followed by Kate Noonan.
Good evening. I promise this will be brief because you're probably sick and tired of hearing from me. My name is Leanne Tell. I'm a resident also that lives on Coach Lamp Lane directly behind Central Middle School. I'm here tonight for the same reason that my neighbors are here, to tell you why allowing high school sports teams to play on Central Middle School fields is a bad idea. You've heard from my daughter a few weeks ago who explained how crowded the fields are just with the middle school sports teams playing there. I understand that you have the high school sports team, that you could have the high school sports teams wait until middle school sports are over, but I think that's unrealistic. Once the high school students get out of school, they're not going to hang out at the school or maybe go home for a half hour. They're going to go to the school, to the middle school, if that's where the high school practice is going to be. They're going to drive or they'll walk over. They're going to hang out until their practice starts. Then, once their practice starts, will they have access to the facilities like the bathrooms and the locker rooms? What if there are extracurricular events going on at Central and the middle school students or athletes are still there? How are you going to ensure the safety of all the kids? Because of recent tragic events happening at schools, I would like to know, as most parents do, what the plans are for keeping our middle school kids safe around high school students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Kate Noonan, followed by Katie Nagaki.
Hi everybody, my name is Kate Noonan Glazer and I'm also a resident of Coach Lamp Lane. Thank you for hearing us on this rainy, cold night followed by a spring day. I'm also the parent of a high school student and the parent of a middle school student at Central, at Greenwich High School. I'm a certified social studies teacher. I'm the administrator of all the religious head at St. Agnes. I spend a lot of time with adolescents my whole life. And I am concerned about this mixed use of fields, and I'm really concerned about supervision if Central Middle School became a high school field and how that would take place. Right now, my high school kids cannot walk through that middle school field. The principal has asked them not to walk through that field because they shouldn't be on the property when school is in session. Now that's problematic. As you know, we have the block schedule, we have finals, midterms. The high school, my children don't get a bus to the high school, they have no other way to get there, and the principal said you can't be here. And all of a sudden we're talking about busing, you know, buses of high school kids to this field where high schoolers aren't supposed to be already. So that's a little confusing to me. And then I'm wondering, as you are talking about this feasibility study, how this study will address the ability to separate the high school and the middle school students, how that's actually going to happen. Play practice at Central ended at 5:15. Oh, I imagine that practice would be starting. Is that my 30 seconds? No, sorry. Okay, good. I thought, wow, how'd it go so fast? So I just think we really need to have a goal that the high school kids don't come to the fields before the end of Central, the day at Central, and I can't imagine that's going to happen. That's not, they can walk there and they're going to go hang out in those fields. That's what high school kids do. Unless we hire people and pay people to supervise those fields, and that's a big expense. I also am worried about traffic congestion. I live 1.2 miles away from the high school. It takes me a half an hour, some days 40 minutes, to go round trip. So if we're going to then bus kids, high school kids to Central, that's only going to make that situation worse. And finally, what I really want to know is how this proposed feasibility study is going to address the nuts and bolts of operating these fields through the lens of keeping our kids safe and in age-appropriate
30 seconds.
So my biggest concern is that this seems like an easy solution to remedy unforeseen issues that have arisen from the school start time change. And we owe it to the students, to the parents, and to the taxpayers in our town to take our time to assess what is in the best interest of the Greenwich Public Schools student body and what the consequences could possibly be, and not just rush in to fill the
Time.
space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Katie Nagaki, followed by Jude Bronstein.
Hi, my name's Katie Nagaki. You've heard from me many times before, but I'm not really sure that you're listening to me. These are real kids that live around real houses around the field at Coscob School, or Coscob Middle School. Central Middle School. I'm tired of coming to these meetings at night. I don't want high schoolers in my front yard. I don't want cars blocking my driveways as teens laugh or throw cigarette butts, kissing their lovebirds. There's pep rallies, college scouts, or parents that just want to watch this one game. This is getting silly. I don't want whistles blowing. I don't want coaches yelling, lights blaring outside my front door. Let's go back to where we started. I am the closest house, and I have the youngest kids. Okay, I'm beginning to sound narcissistic, but I am 233.7 feet away. Are you sure that you've done all of your homework this time? Soil samples, traffic patterns, middle school sports schedules. Have they been looked at with the coaches of the middle school gym coaches? This is not what this neighborhood wants. This is not what this neighborhood wants. Please hear what I'm saying and look at the history of neighbors and lights and fields. We are not uneducated, we are not backwards, and we are not going to walk away from this. Get your priorities straight. Do you really want us to go down any different avenue than what we are right now? We are sad, we are frustrated, we are not mean, we are not angry, spiteful people, but our hands are tied. You have tied our hands behind our back, and that, voted officials, is simply not fair. Our options are limited at this juncture. Again, 233.7 feet away lives a little baby girl, an avid soccer star, a pre-professional ballerino, and the smartest incoming sixth grader I've seen in a while. Yeah, that's biased. Please don't mess with this mama. I know for a fact that many of your kids went or will be going to CMS very soon. Is this in the best interest of your kids?
30 seconds.
From what I've heard, special ed is 1.3 over budget. The current field that you can't light when you want to is looking at a $10 million improvement budget, or plan or something. Let's make some decisions that actually make sense for the kids, staff, and community instead of continuing to frustrate the neighbors. We are nice people. This does not seem as complicated as it is becoming. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jude Bronstein, followed by JP Muir.
My name is Jude Bronstein, and I live at 300 Orchard Street. I'm a neighbor of Central Middle School. When we first heard that the artificial turf had been taken off the table, we were really delighted. We were equally pleased that you would be commissioning a study to determine the most suitable location for a regulation-sized field. This study was supposed to be comprehensive and include a traffic assessment, noise levels, parking issues, soil drainage, and identify the location that will have the least impact on neighborhoods. With the decision seemingly having been made that it will be Central Middle School as a location, the study at best will be an exercise in justifying the decision to turn a school field into a stadium. That's right, a school field being turned into a stadium in the middle of a neighborhood. My neighbors posed important questions regarding the loss of amenity, the decrease in housing value, the impact on our community, the influence of normal teen behavior on young children, traffic, and not the least of which, safety. Your hasty and at best under-informed decision to select Central Middle School as the location for the next stadium in Greenwich without an objective study that examines all the issues and all options is not only a waste of taxpayers' money, but it fails to fulfill that which was agreed between Mr. Tessie and the town. The Board of Education rushed forward without considering unintended consequences. This has happened before with redistricting and capacity utilization, and most recently, the change in the start time at the high school. We asked the Board of Education, we are asking you, who sit on the Board of Education, to slow down, to learn to work with and listen to the community. Not fight with us. Engage in productive dialogue. Recent history has taught us that no one really wins with an expensive lawsuit. Use this $300,000 allocation to conduct a comprehensive study of all the schools and other fields like Havermeyer to find the most suitable location for the field that you're looking to install. Now, this may not be the quickest journey to the end, but this will yield the best and most considered option.
30 seconds.
The questions we pose, my neighbors and I are posing this evening, are not rhetorical. We expect, and more importantly, we deserve answers. Our expectation is full disclosure of the outcome of this study. And with that, we have one last question to you. What is the rush? Thank you.
The next speaker is J.P. Muir, followed by Patty Robertson.
Thank you. I'm a father of a recent Greenwich High School graduate. I have a junior and a freshman at the high school and a fifth grader at Julian Curtis. My family, we live a quarter of a mile from the stadium, so we can appreciate some of the concerns that the neighbors are voicing this evening. My children are participants in arts programs and music programs in the district as well. And I'm very proud of the new Performing Arts Center. That pride of the opportunity, that first-class facilities and the opportunity it presents to the children. I don't share the same pride, though, when I have those individuals and family members and people outside our town attend the stadium events. The lack of compliance with the Disabilities Act impacts one of my family members that has a difficult time at the stadium because it's not in compliance. At halftime, rather than submit our guests and friends to the Porta Johns that are at the stadium, we actually just have people go back to the house for the facilities at our house rather than subject to that stadium situation. My belief is that in order to make a right decision in matters such as these, we need to incorporate the comparables of the other districts, the concerns of those negatively impacted, and those that are positively impacted. I've seen these facilities at Darien, New Canaan, and most recently at Staples Westport. I had not realized the facilities at Staples Westport, the indoor field house, that in Chelsea Pier-esque type of situation. I think that's an important component of the decision as we look at the districts and the comparables. As a father, I have seen the benefits of the later start time and the impact it has had positively on two of my children, compared to my oldest child, who's now a freshman in college, and the direct comparisons, and in support of continuing that start time. I'd like to highlight that the turf fields and appropriate lighting benefits girls soccer, boys soccer, girls lacrosse, football, track and field, boys soccer, amongst others. Given the close proximity, I'd like to see the field restricted to appropriate hours, though, darkened at an appropriate time, with few exceptions that are indeed exceptions. In closing, thank you for the good work and the good volunteer work that the board does in the pursuit of a compromise that serves the students, the athletes, the neighbors, and taxpayers. My family is in support of the current start time, the lighting at the stadium, the upgraded facilities commensurate with other FCIAC districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Patty Roberts, followed by Liz Teltimus.
Sorry. Good evening. I'm Patty Roberts. I live at 9 Bramble Lane. I've been a longtime resident of Riverside and I'm a member of the RTM. I urge you to postpone your decision to move forward with the $300,000 planning and design for a middle school artificial turf or engineered grass. with performance lights. We need to finish what you started and get the master facilities plan done. Decide what you want to do while balancing the needs of the athletes with the concerns of the various neighborhoods impacted. Please consider alternative solutions such as renting fields or changing the schedule of the impacted athletes to have a free period at the end of the day to provide more time to play. When I think of the challenges that our school district faces, I am worried that the pressure to solve the shortage of fields takes our focus away from what we should be talking about. How do we solve the achievement gap? Do we have the right plans in place to ensure that the number of high school population meets the graduation requirements increases? If you decide to move forward with the planning and design for a new artificial turf or engineered grass, then I urge the Board of Education to take charge of the planning. Don't delegate it to Parks and Rec. Don't delegate it to Department of Public Works. This is something that you should own, and you need to drive it with the involvement of your athletic directors and the principals of the middle schools that will be impacted, so that we solve the issues that the Greenwich Public School faces, rather than solve the shortage of the fields of Greenwich overall. Please postpone the request. How you move forward is important as what you decide, and please keep the community involved and gain consensus. As we've seen before with performance lights at Greenwich High School, going against the community wishes can often escalate to lawsuits. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Liz Peltinas, followed by Mark Ducray.
Hi, I'm Liz Peldunas. I am president of the Riverside Association, and I'm here tonight to provide a quick summary of the questionnaire responses that I delivered to the board last month. We surveyed our Riverside Association email list. 80% of the folks who responded were not in favor of performance turf and lights at Eastern Middle School or middle schools in general. And there were a lot of comments at the end that I didn't summarize for you at that time because I didn't have time. And I hope since then you've had the luxury of reading some of that detail. But the summary is that potential health issues related to the fields provided 24 responses. People were concerned about unnecessary expenditure, not a good use of taxpayer dollars. There were 12 people that thought that. Potential environmental damage was another concern of 7 individuals. And the last gross category was spending dollars for educational needs instead or other recreational facilities. So hiring other teachers or money could be going to Eastern Civic Center, et cetera, et cetera. 7 people brought those issues up. I've been listening to the comments here tonight, and maybe now I'm speaking more as an individual than as a president of the association, but I think that Greenwich is a town of neighborhood schools, and we're trying to solve the problem of fields at schools that are basically landlocked by houses and a very limited opportunity to upgrade them in any way without impacting many neighbors around them and the schools themselves. If you turf those fields, you lose opportunities to change those buildings because you've put dollars into fields that you will then be reluctant to tear up when you need to do something to the school for a change in needs. I think that the board should be thinking outside of the box. Are there opportunities in town where we build a centralized athletic facility? Has anyone considered that? And while we're in the mood of doing long-range planning, the school board is going through its 15-year plan. The town is doing its POCD, which is every 10 years. Everyone is mapping out where we're supposed to be going. To me, this looks like we're in planning mode without planning. We have a huge opportunity to do something
30
really
seconds.
good here rather than just slamming down plastic in a field to solve a problem. So I would encourage you to be long-term thinkers and strategic in what you're doing here, and don't spend money recklessly. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mark Ducray with Susan Fahey after that.
Hi, my name is Mark Ducray. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I graduated from GHS. I have one daughter who's just attending college now and 2 students at high school. I think it's clear we need more athletic fields in town for the kids. Where that goes and what happens, that's to be debated. But as a parent, with so many more kids playing sports, women, girls are playing sports like never before. Today we've got field hockey, soccer, hockey that girls don't get the chance to participate in, when I was a kid, which is great to see now. So it's an asset for our whole town to have kids involved in sports. I think we do need to look at turf. Unfortunately, grass fields don't hold up. We were at the Yale Bowl, and they just told us after 100+ years, they're finally switching to turf because they can't keep up with the grass there. So I don't think realistically we could maintain grass fields in town. And if you look at the fields in all the different schools, just the grass fields now, they're in horrible condition just by walking around them. So we're not looking for giant stadium, but I think even if we do grass fields, we need to have great fields for our kids to play on that are safe. We had some kids that we knew were playing in Riverside. Kid fell on the field. There was a rock in the field, and he had 20 stitches on his knee from just a rock in the field that I played on as a kid. I live next to a school, so I'm sympathetic to what the neighbors are saying in Central. I hear that noise from practice and recess, and sometimes hearing those whistles can be annoying, but then again, I chose to live next to a field, next to a school in a neighborhood, and there's some great things about being right near next to the school, but I can see where neighbors wouldn't want, late nights or lights or things, but looking at, say, for example, indoor track, if we could keep the lights on even till 6 or 7, we talked about how great the girls' track team was. 2 of the girls crashed running on the track in the dark, and one of them got a concussion this last season. So we need a solution for our kids that'll keep them safe and will respect the neighbors. One thing we could look at is also over in the Civic Center. People are talking about redoing. Maybe we could do a field house there, some kind of fields there that would maybe help the students and help alleviate some of the concerns. But I really think we need to look out for the health and safety of the kids. And also the last subject I'll touch on is the high school stadium. As one parent said, my son is playing football. Grandpa can't make it to the stadium now because it's not ADA compliant. So then again, we're not looking for, world-class facility, but we need to have railings in our stadium so, Grandma and Grandpa can get up into the stadium and not have to use a porta potty and maybe have just a simple locker room.
30 seconds.
Change. So just to conclude, kids learn a lot from sports. It's great to have them outside. I'm a scout leader, and I can see the benefits of hiking and athletics, and it's a great outlet for our kids and something where they can learn leadership. So I urge the board to go ahead with the study, and let's find something that works for the neighbors, or maybe somewhere else in town that we can do it. But I urge you to support and improve fields in town for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker is Susan Fahey, followed by Sharon Sanu.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Fahey, but I'm actually here tonight as your RTM representative to the feasibility study for the stadium. I know everybody's talking about Central Middle School, but they're actually going to be talking about the stadium tonight at some point. And I just wanted to give you all some background. We formed the feasibility study back in last June, and we had some hiccups late in the summer as we lost Ron Madden and Jim Hickray, and we have 2 wonderful replacements now who've been great. But also on that committee was Chris Winters from the high school, Gus Lindeen, the athletic director. Peter Scher was there for a little bit of it, Debbie Applebaum, in the end, Peter Bernstein. We had a teacher representative, and we had Steve Walco from the high school as well. David, wrong one. Sorry, thank you. The other one. As a parent of a severely disabled child and 2 that play sports, I think I was uniquely qualified to look into some of our stadium issues. And although the study came out, which we'll be presenting tonight, there are things I think that have been touched on tonight that we should just really highlight. These were not wants like people want to talk about here tonight, but these are actually needs. We do have no bathrooms, and not only is it difficult for a disabled person to use our bathrooms, but it was really difficult in the dark, that Tuesday night game. It was like impossible. The bleachers, if you're not been told yet, are been shored up. They actually have some damage, so we actually have to replace them. It's not like It's not a need, and it's not a want, it's a need. We also have no team rooms. As you know, they have to go all the way back over the bridge and into the high school to get changed or to do anything. The bigger issue is when boys or girls are hurt, they cannot lift their clothing or pull down their pants, so they have to get them all the way back to the high school. There's no medical room up there, and then we also talked about on the feasibility study safety. Safety's come up several times tonight, and there is really only one exit should there be any kind of a problem. And I don't just mean a shooter, we're talking about storms, anything like that. You could not get everybody over that bridge quick enough. So we looked at stuff that was really under necessity. And they will be presenting it tonight, and I hope that everyone will be supportive of the Board of Ed and moving forward with the things that we need to do for the stadium. Let me just see if there's anything else I want to touch on. I also just personally wanted to touch on the fact that I do think the later start time really affected pretty much everything we've been talking about tonight, and I would be supportive of an 8:15 to 2:45 day, because I think it would alleviate quite a bit of your problems. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you very much. All right, so the next speaker is Sharon Sanu. That's the last of the speakers that have signed up. If there are other individuals that would like to address the board, I would ask that you line up over there behind the camera just so we can do this in an orderly fashion. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Sharon Sanu, and I've been a resident of Greenwich for 20 years. My kids have both attended public school. In fact, both my kids started here at Parkway, so it's good to be back. I think the last time I spoke was probably about a year ago, and there was a lot of discussion about health and well-being, both physical as well as mental health. And there are 2 points that I want to make. The first is the mental health aspect of the change in school start time was not necessarily related to the 8:30 start time. It was for the compression of time due to the late dismissal time. And the late dismissal time caused, in particular for my daughter, who's a junior at the high school, missing 20% of her school class time. So 20%, that's 2.5 weeks of missing school. Normally, when a student is absent that much, they're not even allowed to get credit for that class. Yet, this board has decided that that would be okay for my daughter to miss that much school. So we really need to go back and evaluate the dismissal time of 3:15. She was a student athlete who was very proud of being on her field hockey team. There are about 80 girls on the field hockey team. And when I say that they were under tremendous duress, I'm not exaggerating. They spent sometimes as much as 2 to 3 hours on buses trying to get to a game that they were already late for because of the 3:15 dismissal. They had very late practices on a regular basis, so they would get home, say, 7, eat, shower, start work at 8, have 3 or 4 AP classes. Maybe that's a little bit of our fault, but the point being, they're not getting any more sleep. In fact, they're getting less sleep because of the 2:45 dismissal. So that's the mental health component. The other issue is that I think, in general, all of our fields need to get better. Not just Central Middle School, and it's not just for this spectacular stadium or this high school practicing facility. Our fields are in dire need of help. So as a board, I was just recently at an ad hoc board meeting, and what I found very curious is that board members were sort of wondering what role they need to be playing in some of the issues that were being addressed. They felt that they were not necessarily doing enough, and I would have to agree. Part of a board's job, a board member's job, is to try to find ways of funding. I mean, here we are shortchanging our children with the type of facilities that we are given. We're still talking about locker rooms that have been on the books for how long to try to get fixed. We've got fields with potholes. We've got lighting issues, all of which have been exacerbated by the 3:15 dismissal. So I think as a board, we need to just kind of step up. Where is your obligation and where's your backbone? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so That's the end of the speakers that have signed up. I see one person standing. If you want to come forward and introduce yourself, so we don't have your name written down. If there's anybody else that would like to speak, I'd ask that you go over there just so we can move this along. Thank you.
Good evening. I prefer not to identify myself out of protection of the people that I'm here to speak about. But I am a...
I'm sorry.
I can't do that?
Yeah. It's
okay, then I
public,
apologize.
it's a
My name is
public
Paul
meeting.
Schmidt. Yep, okay. And let's just try. Give it a shot. But I'm a family member and a friend of many faculty members at Greenwich High School. And I'm here because, based on my intimate knowledge of a significant portion of your student population at Greenwich High School, it's obvious to me that the high school is essentially a time bomb for a shooting. And I'm not trying to be alarmist, but the administration's attitude, in my opinion, towards student discipline and accountability is tantamount to gross negligence. And if not that, then it's simply apathy or fear of legal retaliation from student parents.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you. So we actually have some rules about what we allow people to say.
Okay.
You're making accusations against our staff. It's not something we would actually have you do at a public meeting. If there's specifics, certainly I'd ask you to address them to the superintendent or the headmaster at the high school.
Okay. Well, I can change the tone if you like.
Yeah, thank you.
I can keep it more general. So where I'm going with this is the recent shooter in Florida was most recently part of an alternative school and had an IEP. He was from a broken home, demonstrated violent and troubling behavior towards students and faculty regularly, had a fascination with guns and violence, and I know factually that many students in Greenwich High School fit that same exact profile.
All right, I'm going to ask you to stop. I really am. If you'd like to send comments to the superintendent, to the headmaster of the high school, that's fine.
I mean, it's disappointing that I'm being silenced.
But these are not appropriate comments for a public meeting.
Right, but I feel like these are things that need to be heard.
Point of order. I do not know where it is in our policy that we have a muzzle rule for these kinds of conduct.
Thank you.
This gentleman, we may disagree with what he's saying, but we have to defend his right to say it in public.
We are not going to discuss safety and security at a public meeting.
But I think many people have discussed safety and security before I've spoken today.
I mean, as I say, I may not agree with what he's saying.
Understood.
But we need to defend this man's right to say it in a public meeting. This is public government.
It's accusations against our staff. We actually don't allow.
It's opinion. It's not an accusation. It's purely opinion.
And by the way, if you can just cite the policy where we have this, where we don't allow this, then I'll shut up. But I'm not aware of anywhere in our policy where it says we do not allow this kind of comment in a public hearing.
Yeah, my understanding is that you can't speak negatively about specific people, but I think in general, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying general comments I would agree are allowed.
Number 3 of the guidelines. It says, number 3, no speaker shall include charges or complaints of a personal nature against a board member and any individual or district employee. Charges or complaints.
I haven't mentioned anyone specific.
Well, I'd ask just the tone and tenor of your comments, if you could please mind.
My tone and tenor is one of frustration and fear for my family and loved ones' safety. And I'll finish. I appreciate your concerns about what I'm saying, but ultimately I feel like the high school has not done enough. And you actually, at the beginning of this meeting, you spoke about Newtown. You mentioned Newtown and that we're thinking about student safety. If we're still thinking about student safety over 5 years after the Newtown shooting, then we've failed. And ultimately, it's very difficult for me to every day and very frequently have to speak to these people who I'm very close with, that they fear going to work every single day. And I cannot speak about the student population because I'm not intimate with, as far as my relationship with them, any of them. But I can imagine what they're going through if the teachers feel absolutely terrified to go to work every single day. So I suppose I'm up here to ask everyone a question, is what are we doing? And if we're very good in this country about talking about things and saying we're going to do things, and we have this political divide constantly, which particularly now we do in this country, that's all fine and well, but it's time to actually do something, because something will happen, and we don't want to be one of those places where we talked about it, but we didn't actually do anything. Thank you.
So thank you. I would just suggest if you do have specific concerns or family members do, certainly the teachers union, certainly the headmaster at the high school, certainly the superintendent are all avenues for that discussion.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other speakers, we will close the public comments and move on to our monthly report, starting with the superintendent.
All right, February marks our 100th day of school. We've had kindergarten pre-enrollment registration and a welcome to Brink in the middle of winter doldrums. We had a brief glimpse of spring weather yesterday, a celebration of indoor girls track success in winning the state open, recognition of last year's assessment results, which places Greenwich Public Schools 4th overall in the state of Connecticut, up from 6th last year. So I want to commend the staff and the students and the families who support them with their excellent efforts. Thank you, Cabinet. We have 8 schools on School of Distinction list, and additional schools are incredibly close to making that list. Statewide, only 2 middle schools made that list, so we recognize Mr. Beinstein's Western Middle School School of Awesome category that he created in his newsletter. But truly, the conditions for student academic, social, emotional, and behavioral growth are evident throughout the district, and we must take a pause to celebrate that. We truly must. In a recent review of safety security measures, Greenwich Public Schools was listed as 4th in Fairfield County and 10th overall in the state. We honor and recognize tremendous heroism demonstrated during the recent tragedy in Parkland, Florida. We do review procedurals annually and will continue updating ongoing training protocol for staff, and do take staff, parent, student input into those overall safety plans on an ongoing basis. And that's my report for the month.
All right, thank you. Reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. Ms. Dayton.
All boards of education in the state through the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education are kicking off the legislative season. We are going up to the Capitol en masse. Probably about 60 to 80 different towns will send people on March 7th. And what we do there is we meet with the leadership of the Education Committee, the Finance Committee. We lobby our own legislators and we hear what themes we think we can have some forward momentum on producing new legislation. So I'd like to read you the 2018 legislative priorities for all boards of education. Under the category Address Achievement Gap, invest in programs that promote cultural competency and the hiring and retention of educators from diverse backgrounds. Continue to increase access to early childhood programs. Provide an accountability system that supports personalized learning to accelerate and enhance student achievement and support low-performing students. Expand interagency access to mental health and drug use prevention services for youth. There's only 2 more categories, it's not a lot. Next category, fund existing initiatives. Develop and fund a comprehensive education funding formula that is fair, equitable, and predictable to include appropriate support for special education, English language learners, and children living in poverty. Avoid the transfer of state obligations to local property taxpayers. Support the minimum budget requirement to meet student needs. Last category, maximize resources. Reduce constraints on the delivery of education and remove mandates that fail to promote student achievement. Place the burden of proof in special education due process hearings on the party challenging the placement. Remove barriers and support incentives for voluntary inter-district collaboration to provide efficiencies or program enhancements. And lastly, revise the Student Data Privacy Act to eliminate unnecessarily burdensome provisions. Any board member is welcome to join me as we go up to the Capitol on March the 7th.
Thank you. Ms. Rabin, do you have a report? Sorry. That's okay.
So the Budget Committee, we had our first meeting on February 9th. So I do have to send out minutes for everybody, but what we did was take a look at how the committee was described. You guys all have that in the policy review. We also debriefed on our budget process to date, the presentations that have been made, and any learnings that we can think about as we go forward and continue to advocate for our budget in the community with the BET and the RTM. And then we also talked about the long-range facility plan and getting a preview of that, hopefully on March 15th. We have to settle on a time.
Thank you. I'll just give a brief report for New Lebanon. The first payment has been received from the state for the town reimbursement. The second request has gone into the state already. Foundation work is actually starting, which is actually very exciting. And then the steel work begins April 16th, so you'll start to see the building take form. Still on time and on budget. Always fun to say that. All right. Ms. O'Neill, do you have any report from policy governance, or we're going to hear from you? We're going to hear from you. All right. Anybody down here? Any reports of committee? Ms. Olson.
Yes, curriculum council, I just want to add that we met on February 5th and are looking at the plan for the Math and Focus textbook for the school year 2019. This is K-5, the Math and Focus textbook, and it expires at the end of 2019. So what we're doing, the next step is there's going to be a survey to all the teachers who use Math and Focus to assess how often the teachers use this textbook, as well as look at all the digital tools they use. So we're going to get teacher input and see the they're going to rank the frequency and preference of all the digital tools, as well as the Math and Focus textbook, to see where we go next.
Great, thank you. All right, any other updates? All right, so that's it for the monthly reports, and we'll turn to action items. So the first action item is the textbook recommendations for environmental science, AP Art History, and Mandarin Chinese. Mr. Sheriff.
Yeah, can we take up, instead of taking them as a group, I'm interested in taking up environmental science, discussing it separately and voting on it separately.
So I'll tell you what, I'm looking for motions. If you want to make motions for the other ones separately, we can move through those and get to environmental science.
Okay. Would you rather do environmental science first or last?
Well, why don't we take the other ones up and see if there's any discussion on those.
Do you want to make a motion then? I move that we accept the textbook recommendation for AP Art History and Mandarin. The Board of Education accepts the textbook recommendation of the administration for AP Art History and Mandarin Chinese courses.
Dr. Francis, second. Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the motion? Ms. Wilson? Megan, can you hear us? Yes, okay, so that passes 8-0. So now we come to the other textbook, which is for environmental science. So does somebody want to make a motion to put that before us?
I move that the board accept the recommendation from the administration for the new environmental science textbook.
Second from Ms. O'Neill. Discussion. Mr. Sheriff.
I guess I have a question. I don't know who should answer it. I'll address it to the superintendent. She can figure out who should answer it. When the environmental science book was presented at the last meeting, the representation was made that it had been reviewed and scrubbed, particularly for anything that was particularly political or controversial. The book contains a chapter, which is chapter 17, and it discusses politics, economics, and social implications of environmental policy, and it has specific points to it. That caught me by surprise because it seemed to be a little different than the representation that was made. But it may be that we have no intention of using chapter 17. So my question is, are we planning to include chapter 17 in the curriculum and teach from it?
I would have to review the curriculum standards, and I would have to come back to you with what the curriculum has been designed, because we don't teach from the textbook. We go beyond the textbook as well, and this does not dictate our curriculum. So I can't answer that question. We may, I mean, it's part of the resource. As you can see, it was vetted against 4 other textbooks This book also appears on the AP Environmental Science list. I mean, it's been adopted in many other states as well. So right now, I have to pull that curriculum and meet up with Sheila Sabal and John DeLuca to confirm.
Okay.
Dr.
Because
Gilday, do you
I-
want to Gary?
So was there something when you read the chapter that struck you, or was it simply the title of the chapter?
No, I could go through it. The first page starts with 2 pages of a photograph of Stop Fracking Now. It then goes on to ask critical questions like, when it is asked how much it will cost to protect the environment, it asserts the question that should be asked is, how much will it be, what is the cost to civilization if we don't? It has a chapter on greening of American schools. It has a section on full cost pricing and advocates for carbon taxing. It talks about reducing poverty only. It doesn't provide both sides of that issue. It then goes on to talk about, has a whole section on more sustainability and just environmental policies. It then has a section on managing public land, politics in action. If you read the chapter, it is fraught with essentially political positions and policy advocate. It has an actual section that advocates exactly what you should do to advocate for certain policy positions. Some of these things in here I would agree with, personally. My problem is that's not my role. My role is to be sure that we have depoliticized as much as possible what we're teaching kids in schools. So my concern is about that. If someone were saying, hey, there's 16 chapters here, we use 16, we're never going to use 17, and we don't include it and we don't teach to it, I'd be very comfortable with that. I think this is such a politically charged subject that's a little problematic if you have a chapter and it has these kinds of statements and headings in it, and it just, now if someone wants to come back and say, as I say, we're not going to use that, that's good enough for me, because the rest of the book looks like a terrific book.
Dr. Francis?
So I come from a household where my son talks about me as a tree hugger, and I like organic and I'm very green. But I'm the one who asked the question about the political concern, because I do think we need to be especially careful to be balanced. And I have to say, when I looked at the book, I sort of thought, wow, I didn't realize environmental science was about promoting particular views or ways of addressing things. So I mean, I do share some concern with that. I would say, to me, the other option would be to make sure that if there are portions that appear to be really supporting what might be more of a political view on one side, that there's ways to show the other side. I don't necessarily think that things can be completely apolitical, that you can remove that completely from the subject, but if there's going to be some portion, I think it needs to be balanced. And I think in particular, because I have frequent discussions with my son about many of these things, both of them, that, you know, there needs to be the freedom to express various views, so that I think it needs to be very careful that it's not felt to be one-sided. I happen to be on the side of the book, but I don't think that warrants having a book that's one-sided.
I think when the title of the course and the text is environmental science, we might be able to surmise that it's going to stand in support of environmental principles. So I don't think it's that far of a stretch to guess that there might be some information in a text that might have that. I would also suggest that the AP exams that our children face do have some pretty complex passages and positions that the students need to respond to. So I don't know that, you know, pending preparation of that kind of thing, it probably doesn't surprise me that it would be a current issue that you would hear and see in the news. I guess that doesn't totally surprise me, but we would have to look at the syllabus and the course guide and the curriculum to give you your specific answer.
I mean, I'd be willing, if you want to discuss it because you don't know the answer of how they teach it and how they use it, and you want to go touch it with the administration and just bring it back. I mean, I don't want to slow this thing down. I was on the board, I was a big booster for getting honors environmental science. I voted for that when it came up. I think this is an important thing to be teaching. It's a hot subject. I wouldn't want anybody to interpret it any hostility towards environmental science. I'm very concerned about, to come where Gaetan is. I don't mind any of these views being presented, but they must be balanced. And when I read that in the textbook, I don't see it that way. They may have another strategy, as Ms. Parisi said, you know, they may not even use this, and they may use other content to achieve that part of the text. I'm raising the question because it was a little concerning for me. But I also don't know what this is doing to timing. I don't know how quickly they need this approved. Could it be deferred to the next meeting and not disrupt what needs to happen?
Certainly would have appreciated a question before we could have had the response.
I think there's a motion on the table to accept this book, and I think we should call the question and move on and vote as to whether or not we're going to accept the recommendation.
I'm sorry, and by the way, I did communicate this actually in our caucus. I'm sorry that didn't find its way to you beforehand.
I did not receive a question prior. I would have.
Anybody else? I mean, the motion is on the table, so we can either take a vote or we can hear from Ms. Parisi about what a delay would be.
I'm comfortable leaving my motion on the table, and I support the book, and my point would simply be that I would strongly encourage our administration to look at this very carefully, find the balance, make sure that we're doing that appropriately, and I'm comfortable with that.
Ms. Olson, do you have anything you'd like to add? I just want to make sure you're in the conversation.
I am. Not at this time. Just, I mean, I imagine that, I think, as was said previously, I think it's very important that we broach these topics, and I think as long as, like Dr. Francis had said, as long as both sides are looked at, and as long as, you know, I think it's important to engage in these dialogues, and I would support this textbook.
All right, with that, we'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the textbook? All right, Ms. Olson, are you? Yeah. She's a yes. Okay, so that's 6. All those opposed? 1. All abstaining?
I'd like to have the answer to the curriculum, so I'm abstaining.
So it passes 6-1-1. Thank you. All right, so next up is the monitoring report for whole student development.
Receive any questions? Mary went through the report at the work session a few weeks ago. Basically outlines all of the goals and activities aligned to whole child strategy, which includes anti-bullying, wellness approach, curriculum that's in place, our work with PBS, establishing and maintaining the norms for behavior, clear common expectations for youth throughout the schools. So it lines up to what will eventually be our individual learner profiles.
So before we go any further, does somebody want to make a motion to put this on the table? Okay, so Ms. Stowe, a motion to accept the report. Is there a second? Dr. Francis? All right, Ms. Dayton, I think you can go.
Okay, so in talking about the individualized learner profile, I just have one question. In the report, it said it's very important to collect available data points on a student in one location. I think we all agree. It will allow student planning teams to better instruct the students, I understand. It says it requires the development of systems to monitor students' participation in voluntary activities such as clubs, service activities, and I'd like to know if there's money in the budget or plans to actually accomplish that. Are we on our way?
The district has worked with Hobson's product Naviance for many years. It's part of the career planning tool, and I believe that will be a way that we can add fields to that.
Any other discussion on this? Mr. Sheriff.
I just want to point out in the report, it was kind of nice to actually get a SEL curriculum I know we had talked about previously getting one. I know there'd been a discussion about, well, it's not curriculum, that's kind of, I mean, a fully elaborated, every grade, every unit, standards with an entire program behind it. It's very clear that Second Step is now a full SEL curriculum. I know we had asked for that for a long time, so I'm glad we're there. I know in here that it is the first time we've ever seen that, so by accepting this report, we're essentially endorsing that. And, you know, I was glad to see it, and I'm happy to support it.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask you, I don't know that we're actually accepting any endorsement of anything. I don't know that there's a specific recommendation in here. By accepting the report, we are simply accepting it as a update on a subject matter. If there are specific areas that there are changes, we would expect a written recommendation, and then we would vote on that recommendation. But this is just an acceptance of the report.
Yeah, I think since we asked the question and it's already implemented and the costs are already in the proposed budget, which we already approved. Anyway, you know, take the semantics of it. I was glad to see that there was a fully articulated SEL curriculum done by a quality, what appears to be a quality third party, and I just wanted to compliment the staff for finally getting that done.
All right, any other discussion on this topic? If not, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Oh, Ms. Redmond.
I think I mentioned this at the work session. I definitely appreciate all the work that went into the report, and to get to a place, if it's not this time, where we're mapping to our strategic plan tiles. So I'd like to see the stronger connection on what some of our targets were, and this type of report have that more of a dashboard, common data set included.
All right, so with that, all those in favor of accepting the whole student development monitoring report?
No.
Megan, yes. All those opposed? No. All those abstaining? It passes 7-0-1.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, the next item on our agenda is the Cardinal Field feasibility study. I believe that's you, Ms. O'Donnell.
Good evening. Thank you. On behalf of the Cardinal Field Feasibility Committee, I will be presenting the Board of Education with a recommendation for Cardinal Field. This project started last June when the district hired KG&D Architects to perform a feasibility study to develop conceptual designs for a refreshed and redesigned athletics facility that could serve all of our students' needs and one that meets today's standards. This early concept design was to outline addressing necessary items such as replacing existing features that are in poor condition, installing ADA access and accessible bathrooms, and replacing our scoreboard to a fully functioning state. The committee, through a series of 16 meetings over 8 months, collected feedback from the town staff, the high school staff, neighbors, and interested athletic groups. In addition, the GPS website included a link to help the district collect feedback that could be incorporated into the design. KG&D presented several options for consideration with varying estimated costs that were shared through Board of Education public meetings on October 19th and January 18th. On February 7th, the Cardinal Field Feasibility Committee voted to recommend option B to the Board of Education this evening. Option B has an estimated cost of $21,290,000. And in a moment, I will turn it over to Eric Kyer of KG&D to review what option B offers and the possible timeline. The committee is specifically recommending the approval of the continuation of work to advance the Cardinal Field feasibility study to the design phase of the Cardinal Field project. Option B. Available funds from the current feasibility study project will support expenses for establishing a team and project plan development through June. Actual design work utilizing the $200,000 would begin once the FY19 budget is approved and becomes available on July 1st. The design phase will allow us to prepare for site improvement work to be done in 1920, while adhering to town, state, legal procedures for site improvements, specifically design development, a comprehensive site plan, and municipal approvals. This design work will continue on during the school year 18-19. So the recommendation is to approve the continuation of work to advance the Cardinal Field feasibility study to the design phase of the Cardinal Field project, option B. At this time, I'd like to welcome Eric Kyer of KG&D Architects, and Eric will take us through a brief overview of the layout for option B, and we'd be happy to take any questions from the board afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. You said most of the stuff that I was going to introduce, so we will go straight into the first slide. Right here, we're looking at the aerial photograph of Cardinal Field and the high school campus. Cardinal Field's in the top left corner there. Just to the northeast, which is down the page and to the right, is where the existing 8 tennis courts are. And just below the tennis courts is the primary connection point to the high school and the bridge that crosses the brook. The image here on the left shows the existing Cardinal Field with the existing field and track not planned to be altered. They're both in good condition today. So what are we talking about in terms of improvements? Both the guest, visitor, and the home bleachers are planned to be removed and to be replaced. They're both past their useful life, especially the home bleachers. Currently, the stadium houses about 3,000 people during an event. That's not planned to change as part of this proposal. Planning to replace the scoreboard with a 21st century new scoreboard. That would be at the top of the page, just about directly under. Does this have a? Can you show me? Okay, thanks. It does work here. So a new scoreboard at the top right here. These are the home bleachers right here, proposed to be replaced with new ADA accessible bleachers, so that there will be an accessibility on both the east and west sides here. The major difference between this option and other previous options that were shown has to do with a roadway across here, which connects from the post road to the high school and across the brook. And that road would provide both, could be daily use, event use, as well as emergency use in the case of incidents. We're proposing 74 parking spaces, half along the back side of the field and half along this area right here, including handicap parking spaces immediately adjacent to the entrance. This driveway is shown right here. It does displace the existing tennis courts, which are about in this location right here. And so the proposal here is to relocate those 8 tennis courts in the same orientation as today, just below the driveway. 4 of these courts are shown here that could also be used as a seasonal ice rink, ice surface, if you chose to do that. One of the big portions of this proposal is also in white right here, is to create a new drop-off and main entrance to the stadium with a controlled fencing around the entire stadium for events. From this entrance right here, there would be concession stand opportunities, multiple toilets for both men and women, as well as family. And on the first floor, there's also 2 team rooms of approximately 2,400 square feet each, as well as associated toilet facilities for the teams to use before, during, and after events. There's associated storage in this building, as well as a storage facility for equipment at the top of the page. On the upper level, there's a proposal out there for adding a fitness center for those teams, and that would be housed directly on top of the entrance to the stadium, as well as on top of the team rooms, and there'd be the ability to have some viewing areas on top of that roof as well on that second level. Again, a big part of this is replacement of equipment that's past its useful life and the ability to create accessible both bleachers and parking on campus. And once again, probably one of the big aspects of this option, which people in the community felt was an important feature, has to do with this roadway right here, which gives the opportunity either for daily use, for student access, event use, and then especially emergency use. Today you only have one way in and out of the campus from the back parking lot, and this would provide a second means of egress in the case that one was needed. What's it about? So right here, this area right here, the way that this would be designed is its size as such, so that at any time, whether during this process or in the future, you could have an outdoor ice surface for a rink. If you've been to Longshore up in Westport, they have they put a seasonal rink down. It could be that type of thing. That could keep students who currently go off campus for hockey to potentially be able to stay on campus after school.
Questions? Can you talk a little bit about the feasibility of that, the timing of actually building it, because obviously there's been some work on it.
So, in terms of, well, I'll hit tennis first, and both the track and the field. The plan here is, in terms of the track and the field, that would always be in use throughout this process. There's at no time would this be taken out. There's no plan to resurface either. And currently, the main access is from the bridge right here. Probably over the course of the project, that there'd be a construction fencing, and behind the baseball field there's another bridge that probably would be used as the primary access point while other construction was happening, so that again we could separate athletes from the construction that's ongoing. In terms of the tennis courts, that portion of the project would be done off-season, so as soon as the tennis season was done, the construction team would go in and do that work and complete it before the tennis season started again. In terms of the overall process, if you chose to proceed forward with this, the next step in the study, the first steps would really be to do a traffic study, as well as a sketch plan review with the local officials. That's the planning board that we would go through to introduce this project to them. We've introduced it to many people in town already, but this would be the first official, to a degree informal, but it would not be a complete set of documents. It would be pretty much what you're seeing here this evening, to get them to understand what the overall features were, talk about access. You know, we're proposing something fairly significant here, which is this driveway which leads across, which is connecting at the same entrance point as the current curb cut into the stadium area. But one common question would really be, is there the ability to do a right turn in and a right turn out during the school day to alleviate some of the traffic that's on Hillside and to give students a separate way in and off campus? Obviously, it's a discussion point, and there may be pros and cons to it. Right now, that access point does not is not opposite another driveway or roadway. So in terms of traffic coming in from the left in and left out, that would be much more challenging than the right in, right out. But the overall process, probably this spring, would be to do both those steps, assuming that the community was in favor of proceeding farther forward with the study. It would be doing schematic drawings from an architectural point of view, and from a site plan point of view, civil engineering drawings, which were getting pretty close to 75 to 90% done, really addressing all site plan issues associated with traffic, lighting, stormwater management, etc. Anything to do with site plan approval, so that that process could happen as quickly as late spring through the summer, and we could get in front of the planning board this fall potentially to start the site plan approval process. And your guess is as good as mine in terms of how quickly that could happen.
Fully recognize the need for a better and more enlarged fitness center, which already exists inside of the high school building. However, I don't understand yet what the need is to have 2 different fitness rooms, and that's on page 1. And then on page 2, below one of the subtotal lines, it says athletic training facility, and I have no idea what that would be and how it differs from the fitness rooms.
Okay. So in option 2, the first floor is team rooms, which are just for changing and pre and post and intermediate. The second floor is a fitness center, which is geared towards the teams, so that before and after teams are practicing, they have a place to do additional workouts. There's times when one team is waiting for another team to complete their practice, and so this would give the opportunity to have multiple areas for teams to practice before and after they're actually using either the competition field or one of the other fields. So this center is really geared more towards team use than for regular physical education use. But obviously, if you build it, it could be for both.
So the second part of the question is on the second page where we have the numbers. At the bottom, new athletic training facility,
Yes.
about $4 million. That's not included in the items above, so what is that? Is that what we're talking about?
That's the upper floor, that's correct, that's the second floor.
So that is not included in the line on field buildings.
That's correct.
And is the arrangement of the chart to indicate that that's an optional, not a necessary item? Because I don't see it in the main listing.
I'm sorry, I guess I'm going to have to confirm that with my partner. You know, basically, the reason why we put together this list and itemize it to a degree is to give you an idea as to what some of these features cost. But that one in particular, and you can see even down below, at the bottom line there, it strictly talks about one option for option C, which is a much larger facility, which isn't even on this plan. And it has to do with physical education space on campus, and some of it either connected to the high school building proper or as part of this new complex. So I'd be happy to get back to you on what that $3.9 million
But
portion is.
if I remember from the feasibility committee meetings, that actually was tied to the other plan where there was a possibility of putting a separate outbuilding in. And I think it somehow creeped into this because that, I don't think that...
My associate in the back is shaking her head up as well.
They wanted it separately. They wanted a separate line item for that. They wanted to make sure that they still understood that there was going to be an extra and that was the one that was like attached to the building itself.
Right, I think that, you're right. I think there's plenty, that's if we needed additional athletic space, like attached to the school. Ms. Stowe, I think you were next.
Thank you very much. So we've spent, so the initial phase of the study is 60,000, right? And you're saying that'll kind of get us through June. And then in theory, if we approve this and then the BET approves it, we'd get another 200,000 to then continue to get really down to the detail. Would we, by November of this year, have a significant level of detail so that when we do this, go through our next budget cycle and ask for $21 million, will we have a sufficient amount of information?
So at that point, we will have completed schematic design as well as a full site design, a set of information. And so we will be able to have a much more clear cost estimate associated with the different aspects of the project. And if you decide that some portions of this are aspects that you may not want to do, you could do them as alternates. But yes, by November or by this fall, assuming that we go through and we do this sketch plan and we have the traffic study and we start to do the site plan process, we will have a good understanding by the end of this year as to what the potential costs of the whole project as well as the elements are, so that you can proceed forward with the aspect of the project that you want, part or whole.
Mr. Scher.
Eric, thanks again for coming and talking to us. I have a couple questions about this budget. Lights, 1.241 million. What is that? Do you know what that includes?
Oh, that's the removal and replacement of your lights. There's most likely four light poles. Stanchions that are LED. If you've been to, for example, the new Darien Stadium with the lights there, that's what that costs.
So this proposal is to pick up the stanchions where they are, take them out, remove the ones that are there, and move them someplace else, or buy new ones, full stanchions with lighting arrays on them, and all the foundation work and everything and the electrical that would have to happen to make that happen.
All the hard and soft costs associated, the contingencies associated with that project.
Okay. The other couple other questions, let me just keep going. When you guys originally presented the field, you said the track was not what it needed to be. I think if I'm wrong, it's a 6-lane track and it needed to be an 8-lane track. So, or that was what your compadre, the big boss, in this project said. So I just want to clarify, this is not to get us a proper 8-lane track.
This is to maintain your existing track. If you were to hold
state
tournaments or something like that, you would probably want to consider adding those extra lanes. But most facilities here in the FCX have 6 lanes.
Yeah, some have, right. Most have 6, some have 8. Right. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what's in this, because they're, the bullet points.
Peter, can I just pause you to see if anybody else has questions? Dr. Francis, do you want to go, and then we'll check with Ms. Olson.
I was just going to say one, it sounds like it's a little bit uncertain exactly what we're talking about in terms of the workout facilities there, but as a parent of high school students, I think it'd be great to have more. It's not only for the teams, it's for kids who want to use the gym to work out, it's for PE, it's for lots of other things. The facilities we have are quite small, so obviously as we move forward we can talk more about it, but that's just sort of in support of that. Overall, I'm very excited about this option. I think critical will be trying to figure out the traffic issues, and I was just going to say, I would assume that you'll try and get that done during school time, because looking at the traffic around the high school over the summer would be quite different than what it is when school's in session.
Ms. Olson, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Thank you.
I appreciate all the attention to detail that's gone into it and all the work that you've done up until this point.
All right, other questions? All right, Mr. Sherwood.
Aaron, so the question that I have is, it's been asserted when this project was brought forward recently in the discussion amongst board members, that this should not be a problem to phase this at all. That we can phase it, spread it out over time. It doesn't need to be done as one project. It could be spread over multiple years, even longer. Okay. Can you, I'm looking at that chart. I'm not sure how you, what are the logical phases here? Because it seems to me, and maybe I'm just not misunderstanding, if you got the tennis courts in the road, that's got to happen, right? What goes together here and what can be broken up into chunks?
Okay. So again, the track and field are existing to remain.
Right.
But the elements directly around that track and field should be thought of collectively, meaning the bleachers on both the home and visitor side and the scoreboard. That probably would be one project and grouped together if you were to isolate a project. The second project to isolate would be the relocation of the tennis courts to create the road. Without relocating the tennis courts, you can't create the road. So you would do the tennis court project, and then the project immediately following that would be the road project. And while you're doing that road project, that's when you would probably be looking at the field house, if you will. And
The thing in white?
The thing in white, which is the entrance pavilion and field house, yes.
So you could break it up into three logical phases if you so chose.
Well, part of it is you're going to have to phase it because you're going to have to, you're looking at it from a seasonal point of view. At the end of tennis season, that's when you're going to want to do the tennis courts.
Right.
When those courts are done, that's when you're going to want to look at the roadway. So the roadway is going to have to be prepared in such a way that, you know, and that road can't be done or can't be paved in the wintertime. So you're going to be looking at these projects in terms of when the best timing is for your programs to work around those programs. The field house can be done at several different times over the course of this. It can happen at the same time as the bleachers.
Or it could happen some other time.
But most likely, the best time to do that is after the tennis courts are moved because it's so tight to where those tennis courts are. So, one, stuff immediately around the field, 2 tennis courts, 3 road, and at the same time as the road, you could start the field house. Does that make sense?
Other questions? All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, because I still have that right. I move that we approve the continuation of work to advance the Cardinal Field feasibility study to the design phase of the Cardinal Field project, option B. Second from Dr. Francis.
I have a question about your motion, just so we're clear on this. This is this $200,000, there's a $200,000 request associated with this, and we've already made that in our capital budget, right?
Yes. Right, this solidifies, though, the design that we would like them to move forward with to the next phase.
And it says here, I'm sorry, Peter, did you say it exactly as it's typed here?
I did, we can reword that if that's...
No, I don't, but you're saying it's to advance the study further. It's not to start the project.
No, not to start the project. In fact, we would...
Sometimes see design as starting the project?
No, this would come back to the board, but basically, at this point, it proceeds to the next phase so that they can do the design documents. They'll come back to us. We would have to actually go forward and move this project to P&Z. So it's going to take an affirmative act of this board to do that. Specifically option B, that's what we're doing tonight. I read it from the cover sheet. All right, any other discussion? Thank you, I did read it. All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of accepting the motion? Ms. Olson?
Yeah.
8-0 unanimous. I want to thank the feasibility team. I know there was some coming and going from the team members, and several board members served on it, several members of the community. Thank you for your work, and this is now moving forward, so we appreciate that. All right, next up on our agenda is the middle school fields project. Ms. O'Donnell.
So on behalf of the administration of the Greenwich Public Schools and the Parks and Rec Department of the town, I will be presenting the Board of Education with the recommendation for the middle school fields. In this particular case, your packets included a project plan where we have laid out the steps that we believe are important to making this a successful outcome for all. Some of the background we described includes Parks and Recreation managing and maintaining our fields and logging approximately 6,000 hours of use on the middle school fields alone. The middle school fields are used by the schools for the physical education program, intramurals, interscholastic teams, and other school events, and by the community through Parks and Rec rentals for youth and adult athletic leagues and other community programs. Given that the demand for the use of the fields results in lack of access in adverse weather conditions, Parks and Recreation initiated field improvement recommendations as far back as 3 years ago. In Parks and Rec's FY 17-18 capital plan, turfing a middle school and Tuffle Field was included for FY 19 and FY 21. The situation remains the same, and the demand for additional field access aligned with industry standards is growing. In order to bring our project plan to life, a small administrative group convened on February 12th to consider all the information that has been presented to date, and there has been plenty, in order to prioritize a field to perform a feasibility study on, outline what a realistic timeline would look like, and define what our goals should be for the duration of the project. Central Middle School field is recommended as the first priority for the following reasons. It's centrally located, there is parking availability, and can accommodate a regulation-sized field. Western Middle School has an unknown time variable given the soil remediation project, and would be prioritized as a second middle school field for improvement. Eastern Middle School would be third in line for improvements. Proximity to Greenwich High School as a possible backup plan, and there was a note on this in the cover sheet, for field use given athletic program needs due to later dismissal time. The Greenwich High School athletics program is establishing rental agreements with nearby fields for use until a longer-term solution can be achieved. The site design stage will include filing a municipal improvement application. We'll look at options for turf and grass, or grass. We'll look at options for the field layout. We'd look at cost analyses, lighting, traffic, and safety studies, and obtain stakeholder feedback, or allow for opportunities for stakeholder feedback. So at this time, we're recommending approving the prioritization of a feasibility study, site design and regulatory process for Central Middle School field improvement using the $300,000 that's proposed in the FY 19 capital plan budget.
Dr. Francis.
I move that we accept the proposal to advance for, I should probably read it, I'm sorry. Is there a recommended word here?
It's on the cover sheet.
To approve prioritization, feasibility study, site design, and regulatory process for Central Middle School fields, improvement using $300,000 proposed in 2018-19 capital plan budget.
Second from Ms. O'Neill. Discussion. Dr. Francis.
So I am all for us looking at improving our fields. I'm all for us listening carefully to our neighbors. I'm all for trying to find ways to find the balance. Our fields, I'm surprised it's only been 3 years that Parks and Rec has been looking at this, because I've had kids playing on fields in our town for a long time, and we have desperate need for work on our fields in so many ways. Looking at turfing one field is only a small part of the solution that we need for our town. The thought that if we can, find some other location, or if we can use Havemeyer, or if we can use, there's so many plans out there, one field anywhere is not going to be enough, right? We need this for our students. Forget the high school students, we need it for the middle school students. Our principals are asking for this. They have limits on their ability to, accomplish their PE work that they need to do because the fields are in such bad shape. We already have lots of people using our fields at off times. This is not to increase that, it's to make it functional. I mean, as a parent of kids who've played on our fields all across town, I can't tell you how many times you look out the window, you see it's sunny, and you go, we can't play because our fields are so bad that the rain that was from yesterday still hasn't drained. I think we need better fields. I'm not thrilled about turfing the whole world, no. But I think it's appropriate in some circumstances to do some turfing, and I absolutely think we need to look at our schools as one place to be doing some of this, and I think Central absolutely makes sense. and I'm very much in support of it, but I am glad that we're going to take the time to do a study to really look at this carefully, and I would beg the administration to really think about all the comments that we have heard and to really organize this so that we are taking into account all of the things to make this work well for the neighbors as well. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk for a while because I've got a couple more comments. One other piece that I think is really important is, we have asked our town to help us fund a position to be able to work on these things. We have so many town bodies, we have so many invested people, we have so many people who want to come in here and have their 2 cents about how we do this, and we only have a limited number of people. We're volunteer people. Many of us have other things to do in our day. We have people that we want to take care of educating our students. So, to ask for our town to say, listen, we need to dedicate somebody to really making these plans work, to really think about the aspects of all these projects that we're trying to get done. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, well, we had this idea, we had this proposal, we had that plan, and nothing came of it. Well, it takes time, it takes money, it takes people to make this happen, and if you want it done well, then you need to pay for it. So we really need to get that position to make these projects go well so we can listen to the neighbors, so we can really do a good job of doing it. And I think that's really important, and I would beg you in this budget process to ask for that, to go to the BET, to go to the RTM. We only have limited power. We can recommend whatever we want, but if no one gives us the money for it, it's not going to happen. So I'm asking you, if you want neighbors to be considered, if you want projects done well, then you should support that position so that we can get this to happen. And I had one more point, but I can't remember what it was, so I'll say it after.
We can come back to you.
Project name.
Ms. Stowe.
Okay. Thank you so much for all this information. I'm going to just take a step back for a moment. I've been a coach for many years, and so I more than anyone appreciate how important the fields are. I have too experienced why are we not playing today and turning to a bunch of, well, I've coached from 5 to 9-year-olds, so I've dealt with all the stages of the tiers when it doesn't make sense. So I do think that we need to do fields. However, we have just decided to spend $200,000 to further analyze the Cardinal Field, to bring back to the BET some detail before we go back to them for the next budget cycle for 1920. I think it would be prudent to we have in our capital improvement plan that we put forth to the BET, we had $200,000 already laid out for the Cardinal Field feasibility study, so that made sense. We had $700,000 for general A&E. We're now asking for, I believe, a subset of that $700,000.
Nope, no.
We're asking for an additional. Okay. We're asking for an additional $300,000. I would suggest that we have, therefore, some other money in the $700,000 that I would hope that we could therefore analyze 2 fields at the same time. I think we should be looking at Western as well as Central. I think that we could then make better decisions if we have data on traffic, on soil. I recognize we have some information on soil for Western, but not yet on Central. Types of field, turf, grass, layout, square footage, distance, neighborhood concerns, all the things that we've discussed. But I think as a board, we'd be able to make a better decision if we have information, more specifics, like we're doing for the Cardinal feasibility study, for Western and for Central.
So I just want to add to that because I agree with you wholeheartedly. Pedestrian safety is another thing we've heard again and again, especially in some of our schools that are in the neighborhood. So as we are developing these plans, not just traffic studies, but pedestrian studies. And I do want to make sure I understand the $300,000 is to do the feasibility study, but at this point we're not deciding between artificial turf or grass with proper drainage, right? That will come back to us as part of the feasibility study. Okay. Mr. Scher.
So I had 2 questions and then I want to comment probably the length that Dr. Francis did. No. You were more brief. Jill, I don't understand this. I sent this note, so this won't come as a surprise. The BET, and I spoke to BET members today, they did ask in their, that's not a requirement that they tell us turf or grass in advance, but they said they would like to have that information and it would improve the chances of them supporting this project if we provided that information. What I don't understand, which is very puzzling to me, this field, this project, grew out of a very clear need for an additional practice field to support GHS athletics. It was not somebody sitting around just going, oh gee, let's go upgrade the middle schools. The level of misinformation about this project is quite high. A lot of it was repeated tonight by people who came to the podium. That's probably our fault. We've probably done a lousy job explaining what this project is and why we're doing it. Okay, opportunity for improvement. The question that I have, Jill, is I don't want to get in the scenario that we got into last year, which is they needed an additional field. We said, great, we're going to go march off and get them access to Central Middle School with lights, only to have the football coach apparently turn around and say, that's totally unusable for what I need it for. So I'm a little puzzled that we don't know what it is we need to support, because this is for supporting our GHS athletic programs, considering we've been studying that for 18 months now. I don't understand why that question can't be answered. Is there a reason? Why we can't now, why the administrators can't tell us what they need? I mean, we either need a turf field. My point is, we said, great, we'll get you a turf field, and the football team turned around and said, that doesn't work for me. So that's what happened to us the last time. And so I'm not clear why we don't know what it is we need right now.
Okay, well, we don't want to have more misinformation out there because we never said a turf field at Central. We said we would try to get temporary lights on the grass field. We didn't talk about any field improvements. So
I'm sorry, maybe you're missing a piece of it. Your predecessor and his team came forward and said, we need another field.
Correct.
Okay, they probably came into the start time committee and we said, okay, great, we'll go get you Central. We went forward and got Central, and it was after we had started the process that then it came back from the athletic department. Oh, that's of no use to us because it doesn't support what we need in the athletic program. So we were asking for something that they couldn't use. And I just don't want to get in that situation again.
Correct. That's why I think.
So why is it, if they said they needed turf, why can't we say we need turf now? Is there a reason? I mean, maybe I just don't, I'm actually asking the question.
Right, I think the best reason or rationale is if we do the process properly and follow the proper steps, we're going to have the right environmental impact study, we're going to know more about drainage, we're going to know more about traffic, we're going to know more about potential sidewalks, you know what I mean? You're going to know more about the site because it's not just about could the high school kids play there, it's about the entire use of that field, because if you do go back there, we still have the remnants of a cinder block track back there that has to be removed. I mean, there are some different things that have to happen to make that space the most usable space for any age group child, including the middle school kids that have PE class as well as some sporting events there as well. So I think that is the piece of allowing that to emerge from the study is probably the best case scenario versus us just saying plan for turf. Come to find out that could be the best place we have for the sand and the natural grass. I mean, maybe it's better drainage that way. So for us to try to make that decision without that expert analysis, I think would be short-sighted of us.
Mr. Shaw, wait, hang on. Can I ask you? No, I'm going to ask. Do you feel like you were in a position tonight to make a decision as to turf versus grass?
No, I'm just puzzled. Mr. Bergstein, as I've said, I'm really puzzled since we know what the usage is and we know what we need. Why all of a sudden that's open to debate? I want to fulfill the information request that the BET has if we can. And it's such a disconnect from what we've been told before that I'm puzzled by the disconnect. So I just don't understand. If the athletic department says, this is why we're doing it, this is what we need, now all of a sudden it's open to question, that just puzzles me. I don't understand why that would be open to question. I want to do it off of academic need. I want to drive it off of academic need. Our job is to advocate. Other people can say, well, I don't think you should have that. That's their job. Our job is to advocate for academic need. And whatever that academic need is, I'd like somebody to declare what it is.
Ms. Rabin?
So maybe we can answer the question, because, yeah, that was the original intent, was to be a backup for the high school, but then as you read, that's not the intent. Now it's to improve the field. So can we agree, what problem are we trying to solve? It sounds like we started with one, it grew into more, and I'm not saying I disagree with what it morphed into, but maybe that would add some clarity.
Ms. Dayton? I mean, you want to read the report, take a moment and read it. Ms. Dayton?
I've been very clear since our last meeting that the option I would support is at Western Middle School only. I want to see turf specifically, not grass. I want to cap any contamination that exists. It has a great place in town for traffic. It has the possibility for lighting. It has enough parking. It is a wonderful, optimal place for us to upgrade a field, and I will not support this particular use of our funds, but if there is a motion to apply them for Western, I would support that.
Dr. Francis? Yes, sorry. Yes, please.
Hang on, let us get the microphone situated. Go ahead.
So first of all, I just want to echo that there's a dire need for fields in this town, and I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that. It was said earlier we need to widen our views and look at other options. I also agree with that. If that means working closer with Parks and Recreation, looking at OGRCC. There was talk at one point of Southfield Field, which I know wasn't going to work, but Western Greenwich Civic Center has a lot of space. I think we definitely need fields, and we need to think outside the box and widen our views in that regard. And that's going to take more collaboration. I think that in terms of the middle schools, we heard loud and clear, I have some serious safety concerns, and I had walked that walk from the high school to the middle school at that time, and I would encourage everybody on the board to walk that walk and see how see the congestion at this point. I also think that there are if we are looking to use the Central Middle School for even partial high school sports, I think we're going to run into some issues with lighting. Just from what was heard tonight, I think we would probably have to anticipate a lawsuit from the neighbors at Central Middle School based on comments I heard this evening, as well as previously. So I think we either need to spend more and evaluate all options in all parts of town, including civic centers. But in terms of a middle school hall, I would not be in support of spending all of the money on a feasibility study to look into Central when there are already some very valid concerns on the table. I think we're going to bump into many more obstacles along the way, so I would also support Western.
All right, Dr. Francis.
So I sort of agree and disagree in some ways. I absolutely agree that we should be evaluating Western as well, but I don't think it should be instead. And I think that while it's true that we had started a lot of these discussions recently with regards to Central in terms of looking at it as a backup or an additional space for the high school, this is completely separate. We have lousy fields at our middle schools. We need to fix our fields at our middle schools. The issue of whether or not our high school students go there is really a separate issue, not an unimportant one, an extremely important one, but I think a separate issue. So I don't think we should stop ourselves from fixing our fields at our middle schools because we think that maybe it won't be adequate for the high school. I think that we should go ahead and do the studies, we should evaluate it, we should look to see what makes sense and what's possible there in the safety issues. And I would again beg the administration when they're looking at this, if they want to consider that as a backup for the high school, then to be extremely clear about exactly what it is that we're looking for. We're not looking for, I'm quite confident we're not looking for a stadium. We are not looking for having, 5 teams on there at the same time. So I think it would be very, very useful if it's considered as an additional space for the high school to use, to understand very clearly what it is. We currently have high school students, mine included, who go over to JC to do after-school practices. No one seems to care. It's not that big a deal. They're right outside an elementary school. It does not seem to create mass, confusion. I mean, I think this is something that's reasonable, but I think we need to really look at it carefully and clearly to explain it to people exactly what it is that we're asking for. But at the moment, I think we need to improve our fields for our students during the day at the middle schools, for their activities after school at the middle schools. If at some point we decide that we want to expand that in some way for the high school, I think that's a separate discussion. Yes.
Ms. Doug?
Just one more time. I don't want to be penny wise, pound foolish, which I'm often accused of at home being. So I think that we should take the 300,000, or whether it be a little bit more, and analyze both Western and Central. And I think in doing that, hopefully there'll be some economies of scale anyway, with people looking at both and coming up with different schemes, and then we can make a decision, hopefully like with the Cardinal feasibility study before the next budget cycle, when we have all of the data with all the information we've asked for, but just broaden it to those two schools. Now I understand we still have a motion on the table, so we'll just
Mr. Scher.
I'm going to support this budget, but I just want to say I disagree with the reasons that Dr. Francis has indicated. We've had no discussion in this board whatsoever presented by the administration about an analysis of our middle school fields, what's needed to support the middle school athletic programs. That's never been presented here. So to conflate, and I'm not saying we don't need it, but to conflate a very specific need that we have that is well identified into a much bigger project, candidly, folks, I think is very risky for this board. It winds up making us, we have to ask for stuff based upon need. We could always do more, but it can't just be about more. We have a very specific need. There's a lot of misinformation. Start time revealed some things that we didn't know. I learned, as an example, the BOE was routinely busing kids away from GHS to other facilities. So the GHS facilities did not support the athletic program we had pre-start time. Okay, people don't even know this. They were busing to other locations that they were getting from Parks and Recreation. So the high school facilities do not support, even if we were back at the original start time, the athletic program we have. So we need to address that problem. This problem about the use of our fields is not new. Parks and Rec can't support its sports programs in town if they don't have Board of Ed facilities. So this idea of talking about school and having an out-of-body experience to the rest of youth sports is just not based in fact. The other fact is the town of Greenwich has always rented its public facilities. It's always done that. That is a policy of the town. Those revenues, by the way, they're not being rented by the board. Go read the agreements. They're being rented. We use them for our facilities, our needs, and when we don't need them, we allow other town departments to use them. It's Parks and Rec that is renting out our facilities. And if we start down this road of not renting facilities, who are we going to turn away? Greenwich Youth Football? The Greenwich Symphony? Temple Shalom? Trinity Church? Who's going to be the person who starts picking which organization is worthy? I think we've got to get to a place, and I agree with what the residents have said. They bought a house, they bought it near a school, they should expect what comes with that, buying a property next to a school. I would fully support, because my job is to worry about kids in the Board of Education, I would fully support, when this project actually comes forward, restricting uses if there are additional uses that people want. Because the deal they made was, and they should expect what they get living next to a school. And this is what these programs are used for. For programs that are on top of that, I have no problem restricting that. The last reason I support this is we need an additional all-weather field to support our athletic program. It cannot be placed at GHS. There is no room. it needs to be put at another school facility. The most obvious place to put that is at Central Middle School. I don't support conflating this into paving the parking lot of Paradise with turf in other middle schools. And I just want to go on the record. As long as I'm on this board, I'm never approving a turf field at Eastern Middle School. It's not appropriate, it's not needed. That's just my personal point of view. I will support it at Central. Maybe if we look at it at Western, I may support that. I have no plans to support it in another location.
So I've got to say I take offense to that, because why is it okay for one middle school but not another? If the need is truly about the middle schools and the use there.
You want to answer to the question?
Sure, I'd love
The
to.
answer to the question is if you walk each property, Central Middle School has space for 3 or 4 fields. Western right now has 3 fields. Eastern is so small it doesn't have that space. I disagree with the proposal that was made by Parks and Rec to essentially turf the entire back lot of Central Middle School. I don't think we should do that. I know that is the proposal. I know that's what the architect. The reason is those are completely different facilities, and I think Central should be one where there is a combination of turf, if that's what the academic program requires. If it doesn't, I'm not a fan of turf where we don't need to have it. But if that's what it requires, then that's what we should have. And I don't want to turf the whole damn place because that's not what the academic program requires. That's why I make that statement.
Well, amazingly, you'd find I'd agree with you on that. I don't think we should be just throwing down turf every square inch. All right. Any other discussion? So, Ms. Stowe, I know the motion on the table is to accept it for Central Middle School. Warren.
Just because of the soapbox that we're able to do tonight for some reason. For all the people that were just so distasteful about high school students, your little ones will be high school students as well at some point. And hopefully the next generation doesn't speak about your children in that fashion.
And they're not all that bad.
All right, Ms. Stowe, I don't know if you had any interest in making an amendment, but as it presently is written, it's geared towards Central Middle School.
I would like to amend my initial motion to include feasibility for Western Middle School as well.
Do we want, is there a second to the motion, and then we can discuss whether that's the right amount? All right, Ms. O'Neill. All right, so I guess the question to Ms. O'Donnell and Dr. Gilday is that the right amount to do feasibility for both of the middle schools, knowing that some of the soil studies are already happening at Western?
I mean, that raises some complications, trying to move this forward at Western. I mean, there's a lot of work that we need to do with this design phase. We've heard all the comments from everyone who's spoken about all the studies that we need to do, safety of students, you know, soil testing, and the list goes on. We've listed that here. So I don't have an answer specifically as to whether or not that $300,000 can cover both. But then to complicate matters, you know, we do have the current timeline with the Western soil remediation, where, you know, we're still working through what our plan will be. I don't know how quickly we can start working on a feasibility for that program when we have other complications there.
Well, I guess what disturbs me, though, is let's say that the state moves very quickly, unlikely, it's Connecticut, but let's say that the state moves very quickly. I don't want to see that left behind. So I think the idea of including it from my perspective in the feasibility is some of that planning could go forward, some of that thinking could go forward, so that if the state were prepared to say, hey, we want you to cap this as part of a remediation plan, that we're moving in that road.
I mean, I'll add that we certainly are thinking about it, that this is not new information. But I think as we're starting to work through the design of Central, you know, allow us some time to think through what that budget will look like. I mean, certainly as the team is coming together, we'll have more information as to whether or not there's money there within that 300 to be used toward Western, if that helps. I'm not sure. But I can't answer that at this moment.
Ms. Raven.
And I wouldn't want to detract, like, I think we've heard the neighbors loud and clear, there's safety issues, the sidewalk, there's all the traffic studies, so to just add another school into the mix, I understand the reason, but I wouldn't want to shortchange doing like the most awesome job we can for whatever we do at Central.
Ms. Dow?
And they ask in our capital improvement plan for general architectural engineering, we went from 550,000 in this year and we asked for 700. So I would hope that we could use, that was a nice increase. I would hope that we can defer some of that money and do both the schools, since we're now asking for an additional 300. And I think there's some economies of scale, again, to looking at both at the same time. You've hired a consultant and they can go off and analyze. I know they have to then look at 2 different areas, but there should be some, I mean, if anyone who's ever architected their home knows that, you could add a little bit and get a little bit more for your money.
Mr. Scher?
I'll
get you next, Megan.
We have a massive capital ask, and we have an incomplete master plan, and we don't even have the staff, it's all new people, to keep up with an $8 to $10 million maintenance, and we're talking about throwing more. I'm not suggesting it's not worthy. I think we need to be super realistic about how many projects we can actually manage. And this may sound like a good idea. I'd rather we do focused rifle shot projects that we know that we absolutely need. This is a great idea to go look at middle school fields and what have you. This sounds to me like a next year project, not a this year project.
Ms. Olson?
Yeah, my question for Mr. O'Donnell is, we have not yet tested the soil at Central Middle School. Is there any possibility that we could be out of the field possibility if we found something in the short run? Could that delay? I guess my comment is that we know at Western Middle School, we know that we need to, we're in the process and we know that we need to remediate. Do we run a risk with Central of being out of commission with another field for any length of time?
I mean, yes, I think it's fair to say we do run that risk.
Megan, did you hear that?
It's toxic, it's
Yeah.
toxic.
Laura's answer was that we do run that risk, but I think the point is, anywhere you dig, you may find something, right? There's always that risk. So, and whether you do it now or you do it a year from now or 2 years from now, you still should be doing it.
Right, absolutely, no, and it's an important thing to do. Because I wouldn't want to be out another field without backup solution, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. Dr. Francis?
I guess my issue with Western and wanting to start looking at that, and it's not to rush, but it's, if it's going to be an issue of us waiting another year, and we don't know the timeline, to not have a plan ready, not to be ready to turf it or to, put other surfaces on it, whatever it is, to not have all the information that we need once that testing is done, once we have a remediation plan. That school's been without their field for a really long time. And it would be horrible to be in a circumstance where we now have the remediation plan set, but we're like, well, now we don't know what we want to do with it. Do we want to turf it? Do we not? Well, maybe now we need to look at traffic studies. Now we need to, then we're setting ourselves behind even more. We know that we're going to need to do something with that field. Why not be ready with all the information that we need for the next step as soon as that remediation is done? If it turns out the administration feels like they need to do one, then the next, and that timing is better for them, that's okay with me, but I'd like to have the money ready to be able to support the feasibility when that time comes.
Ms. Dayton?
For exactly that reason, I support Western Middle School as the appropriate location. We need to get started on a school that's been without fields, unable to run their phys ed normally, unable to host any games. It's the perfect location. We do need to know the traffic. We do need to know the safety issues. I don't understand why we can't do the design, the feasibility of turf, even without final approval from the state on remediation. I just don't think those two ideas go together. And I understand there could be a lag time between our design and our execution. That shouldn't be a problem, in my mind. So I would again support Western, but no other field at the current time.
Mr. Sher.
Maybe I'm the dumb guy in the batch. Usually I'm not, but maybe on this one I am. Do we have any, there seems to be like this, just dawned on me, this built-in assumption that we know what the state is going to require us to do in terms of remediation. Do we have any indication that they say, oh yeah, we know what you've already got because you sampled it all. And by the way, if you put an athletic field as a cap, that's going to be an approved remediation? Do we?
We do not know that.
Okay, so that's a premature thought that someone says, oh, that's going to be accepted. Okay, is there a way to, when, I know the answer to when. The answer is when they get good and ready. But when are we going to get the next update from the state and start to move on to presenting remediation plans? I know you guys gave us a schedule, but when is that?
Okay, so let me just think through where we are. We are scheduled, we actually just started we just received information about when they're available to meet with us. So within the next month, we'll be meeting with them. We'll also have another meeting prior to that to prepare for those discussions. And this will be a very preliminary discussion with them to try to gain some feedback as to what would be an appropriate remediation action plan.
And once you have that, then there's the entire EPA process that you already went through with GHS. So if you remember that process, that will have to occur after. This is just a preliminary dialogue. There are maybe 8 options that Langdon has surfaced as potential possibilities, but it's going to be all up to EPA and what they take.
We have always talked about GHS fields, Western Middle School's fields as a remediation project. And there's a logical path to doing a remediation project. Personally, I'm not interested in jumping the queue and playing mental math, guessing games, game theory on what the Department of Environmental Protection and the EPA may or may not do. I want to keep going down the path we were going. It's well laid out. The administration has always presented it and supported it. I'm not smart enough to just suggest deviating from that. So I wouldn't support adding Western for that reason.
That was part of the rationale with Central being first.
Yes, O'Neill.
So if we don't really have the money to do the study for both places, and now with the remediation process still very slow and time consuming, why don't we just use the money we have to do the feasibility study for Central and go down that path?
So there's a motion to amend on the table to add Western. Anybody want to take that up? I think we should do that now. All right, so the motion on the table is to add Western to the feasibility study. All those in favor of the motion to amend? Ms. Olson?
No,
okay.
For the reasons I said earlier, I think that I would either.
All right. Sorry, thank you. So that's 3-4. Those against, and we've got Ms. Olson as no, so those against the motion to amend. 4 against, 5? Okay. Yeah, so 5 against. Okay, so the amendment fails. So then the primary motion is on the table to approve the prioritization of the feasibility study for Central Middle School. Any further discussion? All right, so we'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the motion? Megan, are you in? Yes?
This is the Central.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
You're no. All right, so all
I'm against, yeah.
Those? Central? All those, yes for Central,
Yes,
right?
for studying
Okay,
Central.
Yes, okay, yes. 5 yeses. All those against? And Megan?
I'm against, yeah.
All right, so the motion passes 5-3. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is new policy. It's got the new number P6146.13, multiple pathways. This is our second read. So Ms. O'Neill, do you want to make a motion to put this on the table?
Yes, I would. I don't understand why all these people don't think this is an exciting topic and they're all leaving. I mean, anyway, this is the second read of multiple pathways, which is sort of, it goes hand in hand with the graduation thing. What it's saying is that it's giving students the opportunity to demonstrate their achievement in various subjects through various other ways, and that there are safeguards in place to make sure that their other options do meet the same level of rigor of our regular academic courses, and that this will be guided by guidance counselors and the headmaster. So we're looking for approval of this.
I think this is really cool. I think this is what personalized learning is all about. I think this is about allowing our kids to show us what they can do in so many different ways, and I would encourage everybody to approve it.
Okay. Any discussion?
Okay.
So I sat on PGC when we talked about this. It's a companion to our graduation policy. It is, I think, a very healthy thing to do. Kids don't always learn the same way in the classroom, and this really acknowledges sort of the movement in our system. So I'm happy to see this. Any other discussion? All right, so we have a motion from Dr. We have a motion from Ms. O'Neill, second from Dr. Francis. All those in favor of accepting the multiple pathways policy? Ms. Olson?
Yes.
All right, passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, next up are the 9000 series bylaws. This is our second read. Ms. O'Neill, if you'd like to.
Yes. So, as you know, we've worked with the consultant and the committee's worked on this and presented these to you, and we've got some feedback, and then we looked at them ourselves. And so there is just one that came from Mrs. Raven, who's the chair of the Budget Committee, and she sent us, and I sent it to you a couple times now, the red line document changing the description of that committee. So we're asking for approval of that description. So, all right, any discussion on that? No, okay. Although, come on.
All right, so all those in favor of accepting the 9000 series policies as amended? We have a motion, right?
Yeah. Right.
You have a motion. You made the motion. Dr. Francis seconded the motion?
Right.
All right, so all those in favor of accepting the 9000 series motions?
Okay. Can we just, wait, discussion yet?
But
Okay.
wait, no, he's right and I was wrong. We should motion to put them all on the table, and then if there's discussion, that's when we'll pull them out. I was wrong, he is right.
Okay, so let's do our discussion. So the entirety of the 9000 series motions are before, so if there's individual motions, individual policies that you would like to discuss, now's the time. Misty?
Okay, number 9130, bylaws of the board committees. Fourth paragraph down. No committee shall have the power other than to recommend to the Board of Education unless specially authorized. No committee or member of a committee is authorized to make any contract or enter into any agreement which involves the expenditure of money unless such contract or agreement is authorized by the board either in regular or special meeting. I would like to insert language that makes an exception in the case of a successful mediation during negotiations.
I think, though, Jennifer, that has to come before the board for approval.
Right.
Not in the mediation process itself. I've run it for years.
So what wording would you like to put in?
I sent that to you in writing, but I will get it to the board because I don't think we're ready. seems to be some disagreement over the concept itself.
But what is the wording you want to put in so that we can actually discuss?
No committee or member of a committee is authorized to make any contract or enter into any agreement with the exception of a successful mediation during labor negotiations.
Do we need to check I honestly have no idea the legality of it. Do we need to double check that? I mean, I don't know if there's an uncertainty.
Is it really the expenditure of money though? Okay.
It involves the expenditure of money on salaries.
But you can't do that unless the board approves it, right?
It says is not authorized to enter into any agreement.
And in the mediation section, you're definitely agreeing.
Okay. So I'd like to say that we'll take this out of the 9,000 series and bring it back separately.
So why don't you make a motion to, all right, why don't we keep track of it, then we can make a general motion.
Can I make one other comment on the 9132? I think people need to look at the district curriculum committee. This is recommending a change to have a 3-board member committee for this. This is also 913233.
All right, so we now going to pull that one. Okay, so now. All right, so 913233.
Committee.
Right, the committees.
Policy.
All right. So.
Dr. Francis, maybe you can explain what the issue is.
I was just going to bring up the point that this is a change in terms of having a district curriculum committee, a 3-member committee, and just I think for the board to consider that as and understand that that's different from what we have now, which is that we are sort of liaisons to the district committee as opposed to having the creation of our own committee.
This is not a board committee. This will still be the district committee. So it's not a board committee. It's the district committee. And so we would be fulfilling the same function of being representatives on that committee.
With 3 members?
Well, the reason it was 3 is that Mr. Bernstein said all the other committees have 3 members except for budget. Sorry, I keep on calling.
That's actually what's in our policy now, is that all committees would be 3 members. And what we did is we made the exception for the budget committee just because of the nature of it. In a second. By law, we are required as a board to have a curriculum committee.
We're required to have a district curriculum committee. So who would run this committee? Who would make the agenda? Would we have to have board minutes for it? How does that happen?
No, it would be a district committee. It'd be the administration's committee.
I don't have the 9,000 series in front of me, but the statute does allow for this, the superintendent or the superintendent's designee to chair that committee. So it's within that 10-220 and 221. But my understanding is that 3 members is for board committees, a function of the board, where the 2 members is the function of the administration. So, but again, we can.
So Dr. Francis, you'd like
Through the superintendent as a designee.
Ms. Raymond.
Dr. Francis, what's the concern to have 3 versus 2? Is there?
I wasn't as much concerned about the number as just understanding if we're changing the flavor of how we're running this committee. And that's what I wanted to clarify. And my concern with the 3, so I guess I am somewhat concerned with the number, is does that change in any way how that committee functions, and is that what we as a board want to do?
Any other discussion? No, I that one. Okay.
Are there other policies you want to take up?
Policy 9400, self-evaluation. 9400. Regardless of what CABE recommends, having been on this board for 7 years, I do not think an annual self-evaluation is at all a productive use of our time. We budget 18 months in advance. We set goals that are over multiple years. I would have a hard time measuring our accomplishments within one short academic year. I don't even have data on some of the things we were talking about 2 years ago, like Innovation Lab. I don't know if it's made a difference. It's coming to us, but our time spans for pilots are 2 years, 3 years. And so for that reason, I'd like to recommend the self-evaluation be every other year.
Okay, so when you look at the sample evaluation that's proposed, it talks about vision. The board has a vision. The vision and goals are developed collaboratively. The board institutes a process for long. So it's more processed rather than achievement, in terms of data or student achievement. The board communicates clearly. And then with community leadership, the board communicates and interprets the school district's vision and mission to the public. The board works to promote the accomplishments of the district. So it's that kind of evaluation. It's not an evaluation of student achievement or that. So that's why I think it's easily done annually. I think CABE recommends it to be done annually. So does that answer your question?
We just disagree, and that's perfectly acceptable, but item 28 is on achievement. So I personally feel I would not be able to evaluate our current board if you came back to me in 2 months from now.
Okay.
Are there other policies? All right.
Where were we with the 9321, which is, are we taking out the sentence about the, you are allowed to be electronic participant in executive sessions?
Okay, so we have to get back to 9-1.
Where's the 9-1?
9-1. Okay. All right, so this one came up for discussion last time, and the discussion was as to whether or not we would allow electronic participation, and I think there was a general consensus that we would. Then the other question that came up was whether we would allow electronic participation for executive sessions. There was some discussion on that. I don't know, it seemed pretty clear that people were in agreement of that. I don't know if there's any other issues with that one, but that was mainly the electronic communication one that came up. Did anybody have any discussion or?
So I did actually confirm with town council that there's no prohibition in state law against it.
Right.
So if we want to remove it, we can do that now. And that way we can leave that in with the ones we adopt. But you'd have to make a motion to amend because I believe the document is posted, still has that language in there. So I'm happy to make that motion, Barbara.
Sure.
So I move that we amend the proposed.
Are we going to do them all?
Yeah, so we're going to do them all together. So I move to amend the motion to accept. Actually, let me stop. Are there other policies anybody wants to take up? Okay, so there are 3 that we want to pull out: 9130, 9132, and 9400 that you'd all like to have further discussion on. And then the 9321, we just want to do that cleanup. Is that?
The one other was 9140. It has the representatives, and there was a question of adding the alliance, and then adding BET, and then the question is whether to add BET in general or to add BET with Human Resources and Finance Committee specifically.
It's not saying that we should. It says, it's an example. The sentence says, such as, and I sent this to you in an email, blah, blah, blah. So the committees or commissions and the Board of Education shall appoint representatives to blah, 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 such as school building committees, affirmative action, advisory committees, CABE, blah, and so on. And so what we added as other possibilities was, or want to add is the Alliance and the BET Human Resources Committee and the BET Finance Committee, just as suggestions.
So with that, I think we may want to take that up and put it on the list to take up at the next meeting when there's actual discussion. Because I'm looking at this and it lists the Greenwich Scholarship Association as somebody in the past who's actually been the representative to them and reached out to them. They said, we didn't even know we had a representative.
This is just.
As an example. So
Of an affirmative action that we're a liaison to, and I don't know that any of us are liaison to the United Way, although in some way I am.
You can't get away from it.
Wait a minute, I can do that job.
Okay. So
You would like to seriously?
So we're gonna leave the suggestions in. Okay, we can take.
Okay, so we'll leave that in for now, and we can always come back and amend the policy. It only takes 2 meetings. All right.
We're going to leave it in as amended with the additional things in there?
Yes, we will leave it in as amended. Okay, so the motion on the table right now is to accept them all lock, stock, and barrel. I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that we accept them all with the exception of 9130, 9132-3, and 9400 to take those up at a future meeting and to amend 9321 to remove the reference to disallowing participation in an executive session by electronic means.
And 9140 to add those other things.
But, all right, but all right, so 9400, the self-evaluation, the annual, can't we just take a sense of the meeting of, why don't we just vote on that and then we don't have to bring it.
You want to take it out first and then we can deal with them individually?
So I second your motion, or your amendment to your motion amendment.
So I can, Michael, do you have it? Do you understand what we've done? The amendment is to basically.
I want to make sure.
Okay, the amendment is to pull these up for further discussion. So we'll adopt the entire 9000 series with the exception of 9130, 9132-3, 9400, and was it 990? Yep, that was it. And then the other two cleanups were to change the language of 9321, remove the sentence that says that it would not allow the participation in electronic participation in executive sessions, and also amend the representative examples in 9140.
Adding the Alliance and the BETHLI.
So in my mind, the only one that we need to go back in is the one that Jennifer brought up, that we don't know the legal thing about negotiations. But is there any reason that we can't take a vote on 9400, whether it's annual or?
Why don't we just declare, since he's made this motion, let's vote for those.
And then we can take those up one at a time. All right, so all those in favor of accepting the amendment? Ms. Olson?
Yes.
It's confusing at the other end of the phone, I know. 7-0. All right, so now the motion as amended is to accept everything, but with those pullouts and addend and changes. All right, all those in favor? 7-0, thank you. All right, so Ms. O'Neill, if you'd like to take those up one at a time.
9400, the discussion was whether or not the evaluation should be annually or biannually. So the motion I'd like to make is that it be accepted as is, as an annual evaluation. And I second it.
I second, and I think my response would be, I think we can determine what that means. I don't think we have to say, oh, we have to look at outcomes measures. We can say, okay, maybe every other year it's a more limited evaluation of some smaller subset, but I think to have some pattern of doing that annually seems like it's probably a good idea.
Okay, so.
I actually agree with Dr. Francis. I think we can try it this year and see how we do. If we feel the form doesn't meet our needs or the timing doesn't meet our needs, we can certainly revisit it and change the policy next year. All right, so with that, any other comments? No, hearing none. All those in favor of accepting 9400 as proposed? Ms. Olson?
Yes.
All right, 6, and Ms. Dayton votes no, 6-1. Thank you. All right, you want to take up the next one?
let's look at 9140, which was adding the city. Very good. Okay.
9130, 913233. So I think your
believe that
question.
the 9130 is the one that's going to,
Yeah, maybe.
we're going to go and get checked. Right.
So I guess Ms. Dayton, as in an unusual quirk, as the chair of the negotiations committee, you actually can reach out to council and get clarification on that. So if you can just let the board know, we'll be happy to take it up. I know, isn't that great? All right, so that leaves us with 9132-3, Ms. O'Neill.
Right, so this is a redefinition, it won't open for me, is a redefinition of the budget committee, and it just won't open. Okay, so what else was that in that one? Oh, the curriculum committee was whether it's 2 or 3? Okay, all right. So then the other thing is to keep curriculum to 2 members?
Okay, so do you want to, do you want me to make a motion?
I'm not going to read
Here,
it.
I can do that, I can do this. All right. Why don't I make the motion? I make the motion that we accept 9132-3 with the proposed amended language that Ms. O'Neill sent on the budget committee, I guess the finance committee. And additionally, to change the number of members to the curriculum committee to 2 board members, not 3. Get a second on that? Ms. Stowe. All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor? How about those participating by phone? All right, that passes 7-0. Thank you. I know this looks ugly sausage making, but this is how government is done, folks. A lot of work went into the, I know, it's for the camera, everybody at home, my big fans. But a lot of work went into this from the Policy Governance Committee. And Dr. Shorn, thank you so much for all of that hard work. I think this will serve us well in the future.
I'd like us to go forward. I'd like us to be at the beginning of the presentation, so everyone really cares.
You're always going to be at the end. All right, so next up, item G, E020, budget transfers. Ms. O'Donnell.
Okay, seeking your approval.
All right.
Are there any questions?
Motion for Ms. Stowe, any second? A second, Ms. Dayton. Any discussion for somebody who stayed here for so long? Ms. Dayton.
Do you want me to go back?
This is quick and easy. What is the long-term plan to staff this position?
We're working with the town to go out and re-advertise and get a new list for this particular position. We had a candidate selected, declined, so now we have to reestablish the list and go through the process again. As you know, with all the non-certified positions, we have to go through the town process, and so what that does is it forces us to have temps in positions, and therefore we're just shifting the funding out of the salary account to the temp account.
Thank you. All right, any further questions or discussion? With that, all those in favor of accepting? All right, Ms. Olson?
Yes, yes.
Passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, last up, the financial and staffing report.
Okay, seeking your approval for the report ending January 25th, 2018.
All right, is there a motion to accept? Ms. Rabin, is there a second? Dr. Francis, discussion? Actually, I'm Mary. Hi, Mary. I think it's time for us to have probably a discussion in an executive session so we can get further detail on this, because we're going to need to go into particulars. I think we're going to need to do that in executive session. The spending on the placements. And we'll work with the superintendent to schedule that. But I think we discussed that last time, getting more information about that spending. And I think at this point, we're going to need to see that.
We were looking for what portion was
We were looking for what portion was out of district placements and then what was the settlements. And I think there was a number figure to break down that 1 million.
I did give you a breakdown at the last meeting of the expenditures into out-of-district placements and settlements. They're both covered in line 208.
Shouldn't the board vote or have a say as to whether or not we really want this executive committee, the executive meeting?
We can have that discussion, but I think at the last meeting, it was clear that there was an interest in getting more information about this.
So let's see how much interest there is.
Well, one of our members is actually absent for a family issue at the moment. So I'd rather not. I mean, we can take a pulse, but. Yeah. All right. All right, well, I guess individual members can send questions to the superintendent, and we'll have to figure out what we can do. Ms. Dayton.
Nice compromise is that in May, we get a chance to delve deeply into special education. I think each board member should prepare a list of questions thoroughly and really break it down. And I know I will be bringing, this is a preview, I will be bringing some cost savings proposals to the board, but I will wait for May. I think that there are opportunities, I really do, and I think more and more districts are thinking this way. So I'm going to wait for later, but it's a very big concern of mine, and I continue to lobby the legislature to help us out.
All right, other discussion on this item? Ms. Olson, anything? No. Estelle? Sure.
First of all, I think Lori, awesome. I like the new style. Okay, I'm following it. But so, quick question for you is, you mentioned under the school start time that the business office is working to identify the funding sources for these anticipated costs. You're seemingly worried a little bit about having to ask for an additional appropriation. That makes me a little nervous. So can you tell me, I guess, where we're looking? You seem to have some ideas.
And the only ideas I have at the moment is that I know that we typically trend toward giving a certain amount of money back each year. So at this time, we're working on developing forecasts. We're a little challenged with the limited technological resources that we have. It's unfortunate because I really would love to play around with all this data, but that's been a problem too. So right now, I can say that we are looking at our run rates. They seem to be consistent with what we've seen in prior years. I would love to be able to do forecasting, which is a different tool, right? And then, again, just being mindful of the fact that, we have historically given back, X number of dollars, and that seems to be the trend again for this year.
Thank you.
Ms. Rabin.
But it looks like you earmarked that for the 1 million in the special ed, so, probably go to both places.
Should I? So I actually when I spoke to special ed here specifically, I was looking at the special ed program on its own. I wasn't looking at it district-wide.
Ms. Dayton.
I guess it goes without saying, but I urge our fellow board members to lobby the BET not to reduce our operating funds, because in that situation, we're going to be in real trouble.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, with that, all those in favor of accepting the financial and staffing report? Ms. Olson? All right, passes 7, are we good? Yes. Passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, that leaves agenda planning. Dr. Gilday, Kim?
The only thing I picked up from tonight, other than what's already noted on here as changes, is adding the policy that's coming back.
Yeah, that's going to be a TBD, and when Ms. Dayton gets the information, she'll let us know when to schedule that. I don't know, did we settle on a time for the master facilities plan? I think we had looked at the April work session.
April 5th, you do need to reschedule a number of items now that had been scheduled for that date. So that's been added to the to-be scheduled list.
Okay. Anything else anybody else wants to see? Dr. Francis?
Lighthouse project? Okay.
Okay, anything else? All
I
right,
mean, we had talked about doing a separate date for the master plan and not necessarily stuffing it. So.
It ended up because of a break that we're looking at needing to do it that night. Some of the thought of doing it that way is, if you remember back to January when we got snowed out for our work session, we were able to sort of carry through the work, and that's what it's really going to look like next year on our calendar. With the work sessions, we'll have deeper dives on things and then take other stuff up at the public meeting.
But I guess what I was saying is, if we're not going to do the extra meeting for the master plan, maybe we could do an extra meeting for the Lighthouse project.
That's a possibility. I think scheduling was our big challenge for April. And you saw the emails flying around about picking dates. Anyway, I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Did my job, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Dr. Francis?
Move to adjourn.
All right, all those in favor? All right, thank you very much. We are done.
Except for you, Miss Olson, the meeting continues.
Stay on the line.
All right, have a good night.